Chapter 432. The door opened, lights spilled out from the tavern, intersecting with the darkness of the street. The voices and laughter rose and fell like the tide, the figures coming and going were like ghosts, carrying their own thoughts and forgetting to take another look, brushing past each other. Faintly, there seemed to be a wisp of fragrance, faint and dark, like the twists and turns of life. He carried the wine jug, looking ahead, into the deep night, walking alone, not looking at the person beside him. That slender figure, when she pushed open the door and entered, the door swayed, the light and shadow intertwined. After a moment of time, her figure stopped at the door. Imprinted in her eyes was the lively scene of the bright lights in the room. She was deep in thought, the light shone on her face, reflecting a dazzling luster, like she was immersed in the memories of the past. She frowned slightly, as if thinking about something. After a moment, she suddenly turned and pushed open the door again. The long street was long, the tide of people surged in the darkness, like there were ghosts walking in the night. She looked up, searching for the figure that brushed past her that made her heart jump. That figure was somewhat strange, but also seemed exceptionally familiar. Lu Chen carried the wine jug and walked on the dark street, his arms swaying slightly, the wine jug in his hand also swaying, the fine wine in the jug occasionally emitting a soft sound. He walked past a few streets, and when he saw the Shima Bridge in the distance, he suddenly stopped. He looked up at the night sky, the clouds were dense, there was no starlight, causing the earth to be dark in the night. Only a unique city like the immortal city could still shine like a jewel in such a night. He picked up a jug of wine and drank a mouthful, the fine wine rolled down his throat, there was a burning pleasure. The night wind slowly blew, he stood where he was in thought for a moment, then suddenly turned and walked in another direction. Behind him, the darkness swayed, occasionally a figure walked by, as if there was a pair of eyes staring at his back, and after a while, a dark figure walked out from the dark street, standing at the place where Lu Chen had just stood. In the darkness, the person's face could not be seen clearly, only that she turned to look in the direction Lu Chen left, and inadvertently looked back at the Shima Bridge not far away. On this night, Lu Chen was a bit like a wandering ghost, walking alone in this brightly lit city, walking on the darkest street, all the way to the butcher's shop he had come to a few days ago. The butcher called Rui Xiaotian had long escaped, and he did not know where he went. He still remembered that there was a blooming peach tree in that house, and of course, there was a dark and mysterious but actually empty secret passage under the tree. He went around to the back of the house that had become a haunted house and jumped over the wall. When he landed, there was no sound. In the darkness of the night, the house was as cold as ever. The ground was still messy. After not seeing it for a few days, it seemed that there was an even more desolate and decadent atmosphere in the surroundings. Only the peach tree in the courtyard, even in this late night, was still in full bloom, showing vitality, and a faint fragrance floated in the night wind. Lu Chen glanced around, then went straight to the peach tree. The entrance to the secret passage under the tree was still open, dark, like a big mouth of a demon. A dark figure flew out of the night, swept over the high wall, and stared at the courtyard below for a moment, only to see only silence. The courtyard was quiet, the peach blossoms were in full bloom, and there was no one else in sight. The figure paused for a moment, then fell from the wall, like a falling leaf, quietly, blending in with the darkness, only a pair of clear and bright eyes shining like gems in the darkness. In the untended courtyard, the grass and wildflowers seemed to grow uncontrollably, some places even almost reaching the ankles, and the air was filled with a much stronger smell of grass than usual. A wind swept through the darkness, and the grass slightly rose and fell, making rustling sounds. She frowned slightly, subconsciously feeling that something was strange, so she looked around even more vigilantly, and finally her eyes fell on the most conspicuous and most beautiful peach tree in the courtyard. The peach blossoms on the tree were like snow falling in the darkness, sparkling. She slowly walked over, the surroundings were still quiet, not a single person, not the slightest movement. There was flat ground under the tree, and a little further, it was the entrance to the dark secret passage that suddenly appeared on the ground. The person who came later stopped, looking at the secret passage, as if hesitating whether to go in or not. Another gust of night wind blew over. The peach tree trembled, and the peach blossoms on the tree swayed. It was as beautiful as a grand snowfall. She couldn't help but look up. A falling petal was reflected in her crystal-clear eyes, shining brightly. Then, the sound of the winds suddenly became violent, and a black shadow suddenly pounced out, like a roaring magical beast, sweeping away all the beauty in an instant, shattering the petal. A bunch of black flames coldly and mercilessly spewed out from the darkness, chopping down towards her head. She gave a light shout and took a step back. She didn't see how she moved, but a bright and dazzling light appeared out of nowhere in her hand. It was a cloudy night with no stars or moon, but the moment she pulled out her sword, it was as if a bright moon had suddenly risen and shone into the desolate and dilapidated courtyard. The moonlight was like water, the sword essence like the cool autumn, a sword cut through the darkness, as if it instantly illuminated the surrounding darkness, broke through the cold wind, and directly faced the black fire, bringing with it an unstoppable brilliance. The sword light illuminated the man's face, somewhat cold, somewhat weathered, and also a bit of sudden surprise. The black fire in the sword light flickered. Although it was messy, it was not extinguished. The black dagger accurately found its target in the dazzling sword shadows and hit the tip of the long sword that was as bright as autumn water. Clang, a clear and melodious sound echoed in the courtyard. Two figures intertwined, and the fierce and violent power roared like a ferocious beast. It was like a wild horse that had broken free of its reins and was about to devour someone, thirsting for the taste of blood. Their faces were reflected in the light of the sword. The blades crossed, one stabbing at the chest, the other at the throat. The wind howled mournfully, but then suddenly stopped. The light suddenly brightened, and then became silent. The darkness returned. The peach tree was still swaying, countless petals falling, like the last cold snow. Then, the two figures stopped. In the darkness, there was the sound of quiet breathing, the sound of a gentle heartbeat in the chest, a familiar gaze, a familiar face, and a strange and cold sword against the chest and throat. Lu Chen looked at Su Qingjun, who stood quietly in front of him, who seemed to grow more beautiful in the darkness. He sighed softly and said, "So it is you." As soon as he finished speaking, he looked down and felt a coldness in front of his chest. That cold sword had pierced through his clothes and into his chest. Chapter 433. The icy edge of the sword had a bone-chilling coldness that seemed to envelop his entire heart, causing Lu Chen's body to suddenly freeze. In the darkness, the two of them stood facing each other. The sharp and bright sword seemed to be the bridge between them. The ancient sword in her hand seemed to have weathered countless years of wind and rain, but it was still shining brightly at this moment. It reflected Su Qingjun's cold and beautiful face. Amidst the falling peach blossoms around her, it seemed like the most beautiful petal of the night. The blood was still warm. It slowly flowed out from the wound, sliding over the tip of the sword and then slowly dripping down. The blood dyed his clothes red, but it could not warm up her sword. The sword was like ice, stabbing into his chest. He should have retreated, flipped, crouched on the ground, or flown up. He should have used hidden weapons, strange moves, risked his life, and gambled. In such a dangerous situation, this man should have had dozens of ways to adapt to the situation, to struggle, to counterattack, to fight for that last chance of survival. But for some reason, after Lu Chen's body froze, he still stopped in place. His hand dropped and the black sword also moved away from Su Qingjun's throat. Su Qingjun's bright and deep eyes quietly looked at him. Her hand was as steady as a boulder, her sword as bright as autumn water. She looked at his chest, looked at the blood staining his clothes. Bit by bit, it slowly spread out. He did not retreat to escape, and she did not continue forward. The night was as cold as water. They just stood there silently, facing each other, looking at each other without saying a word. This situation seemed a bit sad, but also a bit funny. It was like two children who had been good to each other, but after quarreling and getting angry, they still remembered how good the other was, but they still had to be angry and glare at each other. Because there were some things that were still hard to forget. "You killed my only brother." After an unknown amount of time, Su Qingjun finally spoke. Her voice was calm and unperturbed, but it seemed to echo in the night. It was unknown if she had said these words to herself countless times in the past few years. Lu Chen remained silent, but he didn't appear to be timid or guilty. He didn't avoid her gaze, nor did he avoid her piercing gaze. He looked at her and then nodded. The blood on his chest slowly seeped out a bit more. The corner of Su Qingjuan's lips twitched like she was gritting her teeth. Her face seemed to be covered in a layer of frost, making it hard for people to see her heart under the ice. She firmly looked at this man, looked at the blood on his chest, and asked word by word, why? He deserved to die. Lu Chen did not explain, nor did he say too many words. He only used these 3 words to answer her. Su Qingjun fell silent. After a while, she spoke again, because of Enchanting? Yes. Lu Chen said, for Enchanting. The 2 of them fell silent again. After a while, Su Qingjuan's gaze fell on Lu Chen's right hand. That hand was still holding a black blade. Not long ago, it had been placed on her white and tender neck. In the dark night, it seemed to have restrained all of its light. Why did you put away your sword just now? She asked him. Lu Chen smiled and said in a low voice, I have already killed many people who have been good to me. I don't want you to be one more. Su Qingjun stared at this man's eyes, as if she wanted to see through his heart, through the dark flames in his black pupils, as if she wanted to see all of his secrets. After a moment, she took a step back. The cold blade slowly left his chest and was pulled out from between the flesh and blood. Blood suddenly sprayed out, but fortunately, there was not too much blood. It was probably because the sword was sharp that the wound caused was small. Lu Chen reached out to cover the wound on his chest and silently treated it. Not long after, the wound stopped bleeding. He raised his head to look at Su Qingjun. Su Qingjun had sheathed her sword at some point and walked to the blossoming peach tree. She stared blankly at the beautiful peach blossoms. They were as beautiful as gems in the night sky, exuding exuberant vitality. It is rare to see such beautiful peach blossoms on the mountains of Kunlun. At this moment, she had her back to Lu Chen. Not long ago, they had fought to the death, and she had even stabbed her sword into his chest. Lu Chen slowly walked over, glanced at her, and then stood beside her under the peach tree. The night wind blew, and the peach blossoms slightly trembled, swayed, and a few petals fell. The flowers are in full bloom, and they will probably wither in a few days, he said. Su Qingjun stretched out her hand and caught a falling petal. It was small, soft, and pink, and fell into her white and delicate palm. It was like the most beautiful words in spring, like her face when she was happy. She sighed softly and let go of her palm, letting the petal drift away with the wind. As for Enchanting's funeral, her family has already prepared for her. She was buried in the ancestral land in a lively and grand manner, she said faintly. She paused in the middle as if she was a little hesitant, but in the end, she still continued and said, I wanted to go and pay my respects to her, but her parents refused, so I could only pay my respects in the direction of her grave at the edge of the cliff outside the cave. Lu Chen shook his head and said, It's none of your business. You don't have to do this. Su Qingjun smiled a little sadly and said, When she was alive, she used to call me elder sister, and I used to think of her as a younger sister. In these years, I often think of her in the dead of night, and then I can't sleep. What about you? She looked at Lu Chen, stared into his eyes, and asked, In these years, you have been a fugitive, and the 4 seas are your home. In the end, have you ever thought of an old friend and couldn't sleep? No. Lu Chen met her gaze and said calmly, I have a clear conscience, and I sleep well. I occasionally think of Enchanting, but I don't think of her often. Su Qingjuan's face suddenly paled. She turned around with a whoosh and stared at Lu Chen, shouting, That's right, you're a real man. You're truly a straightforward person. You kill people and then run off to the ends of the earth, but have you ever thought about me? Do you know how I lived these years? How many people looked at me with strange eyes? Even my parents treated me coldly, and saw me as an enemy. Every time I went home, it was like entering an ice house. Every night, I would think of that night, my younger brother who died in front of me, and the scene of you killing him. Every night, I would wake up from my dream. I just want to ask you, that night, why didn't you just kill me as well? She angrily and sorrowfully asked Lu Chen in a loud voice. Lu Chen was silent. After a while, he said, at that time, I liked you. Su Qingjuan's body suddenly stopped, and the entire courtyard became quiet at that moment. The night wind blew, and peach blossoms fell, bringing with them a wisp of fragrance, landing on their shoulders and hair. Chapter 434. The night was quiet and a little cold, but it also seemed a little gentle. The two of them did not speak for a while. Su Qingjun lowered her head slightly. The ancient sword in her hand had already been sheathed. Her eyes were as clear as gems, shining brightly, but she did not look at Lu Chen again. She only shook her head after a moment of silence. Then she turned around and faced her back to Lu Chen. After that day, I went to investigate the entire process of little Mo coming down the mountain and returning home. Although until now, I still find it hard to believe that little Mo would actually kill Exian, but that night, he really did kill little sister Exian. Her voice sounded a little shaky, and carried a bit of helpless grief. Lu Chen silently looked at her back and listened quietly. My parents were very sad about this matter. They lost their son at such an old age, and it was killed right in front of them. No one could bear this. My mother has always blamed me, blaming me for not saving little Mo in time. So in the past few years, whenever she saw me, she would scold me or just ignore me. The night wind blew, and her clothes fluttered. Her figure looked a little frail, and her voice sounded a little erratic. That year, when we were on the mountains of Kunlun, we met by chance. Now that I think about it, you should also be a person with secrets. But that doesn't matter anymore. When I was with you in the past, there was indeed a period of happy days. It's just that, my parents are still my closest relatives. Even though Lil Mo did something wrong, he's still my only brother. She turned around and looked at Lu Chen. In the night, under the cool breeze, she did not cry, nor did she look more agitated. She just looked at Lu Chen and said, I can't get over this. Although I know that little Mo deserved it, I still can't. I can spare you, but I can't do anything else. Do you understand? Lu Chen did not speak, and only responded with silence. Su Qingjun sighed faintly, and a trace of pain and resentment flashed in the depths of her eyes. Then, she turned around and prepared to leave. However, just as she took 3 to 5 steps forward and was about to leave the courtyard, Lu Chen suddenly called out to her from behind. Then, he asked a somewhat baffling question, hey. Su Qingjuan's body paused for a moment. Without turning her head, she said, what? You know that damn Baldy, right? This sentence was abrupt, rude, and not too polite. It suddenly broke or diluted the originally sad and lingering atmosphere of the night. It also stunned Su Qingjun for a moment. She didn't react for a moment and said with some surprise, damn Baldy, who is he? Lu Chen said, oh, he has another name in your Kunlun party. You all call him Perfected Tianlan, right? Su Qingjun suddenly turned around and looked at Lu Chen in surprise. She was probably frightened by this person who dared to call a perfected cultivator of Huashan realm, damn Baldy. After a while, she nodded in astonishment, and then couldn't help frowning and saying, you, be careful with your words. How dare you be so disrespectful to Martial Granduncle Tianlan? Lu Chen snorted and looked a little disdainful. He said, don't worry. For so many years, even in front of him, I have directly called him that. It seemed that Su Qingjun couldn't accept that someone dared to be so disrespectful to Perfected Tianlan. She couldn't help looking up and down at Lu Chen, and then blurted out, how dare you do this? Are you the long-lost son of Perfected Tianlan? Although Lu Chen had always been calm and tough, when he suddenly heard Su Qingjuan's sudden words, he almost staggered and was stunned. After a while, he came to his senses and shook his head repeatedly. He even spat and said, "Nonsense. Nonsense, how could I be that damn Baldy's son?" Su Qingjun said, "Then how dare you be so rude, and how could Martial Granduncle Tianlan tolerate you like this?" Lu Chen spread out his hands and said, "It's a long story. I'll tell you in detail later when there's a chance. In short, you can think of it as, well, that damn Baldy owes me a lot of money. Yes, he owes me a lot." He smiled and said, "So, he has to accommodate me a little. But that's not the point. What I want to tell you is that now I'm also working for him." Su Qingjuan's clear eyes suddenly flashed, as if she had thought of something else at this moment. She stared at Lu Chen and said, "When you entered the Kunlun party, was it also for?" Lu Chen said straightforwardly, "At that time, I also listened to his orders and worked for him." Su Qingjun was silent and then nodded slowly. She didn't continue to ask Lu Chen's purpose in entering the Kunlun party that year. After this period of conversation, the atmosphere between the two of them had unknowingly changed from a little desolate, resentful, and silly parting. At least at this moment, everyone was talking more normally. Lu Chen breathed a sigh of relief in his heart and said to Su Qingjun, "As far as I know, this time you came to the immortal city from the Kunlun mountain, you should also be under the order of that damn Baldy. Moreover, there were many elites of the Kunlun party who came with you." Su Qingjun was shocked again. The way she looked at Lu Chen suddenly became a little different. She said, "How do you know about this?" She paused and then frowned slightly. She said to Lu Chen, "In addition, I don't know what happened between you and Martial Uncle Tianlan, but after all, he is a respected senior of our Kunlun party. Even to you, he is also an elder. I don't like hearing you call him by his name all the time with sarcasm." Lu Chen thought for a moment and then said straightforwardly, "You're right. Since you don't like it, then I won't call him Death Ray anymore. Well, I'll call him Supreme Tianlan from now on." Su Qingjun didn't seem to expect that Lu Chen would change his name so quickly after being reprimanded by her. For a moment, she was a little embarrassed, but for some reason, she still felt a little happy in her heart and said, Lu Chen said again, "I don't know if he told you the purpose of asking you to come to the immortal city, but as far as I know, his biggest wish now is for, well, for the sake of the world's righteousness, to stand up and fight against the evil and cunning devil cult." While speaking, he glanced at Su Qingjun. The beautiful lady nodded slightly and revealed a smile, then said in a deep voice, "To tell you the truth, right now I'm doing this big thing for him and the current situation is very grim. Not to mention the devil cult's savagery and cunning, the most worrisome thing is that Zhengxiameng has been peaceful for a long time, everyone only wants to live peacefully, many of the true lords and major sects are not willing to put in the effort to do this. Only we, under the leadership of Death Ray, True Lord Tianlan, did this arduous and thankless thing with all our heart and soul, regardless of the danger." Su Qingjuan's expression changed slightly but her eyes became brighter and brighter, staring at Lu Chen. Lu Chen nodded to her and said, "Right now the situation is difficult and dangerous to such an extent, probably because of this, Supreme Tianlan has no choice but to borrow the strength of his own sect. But no matter what, this matter is still too dangerous. If it's possible, I still hope that some things can be done by people like me. You don't take the risk, otherwise if there's a mishap." "I'm not afraid." Su Qingjun suddenly interrupted his words, her eyes shining, sternly said, "You're very good, but I won't be one of those who turn a blind eye to danger and stop moving forward." Lu Chen looked at her eyes, silently nodded. After a moment, he pointed to the black hole below the peach tree and then said to Su Qingjun, "Actually there's a reason why I came here tonight. That is the lair of the devil cult's devil cult that we found a few days ago. Now he has escaped, but I still want to go down and search carefully. Do you want to go down with me to take a look?" He looked at the beautiful lady in the night, invited with a smile. Chapter 435. After lighting 2 torches, they walked down the stone steps one after the other. Lu Chen once again came to this secret passage that did not seem to have any secrets. Su Qingjun followed behind him and looked around curiously. At the same time, her eyes also revealed a bit of caution. The fire dispelled the darkness nearby. Lu Chen looked around and found that there was basically no change from the scene in his memory. He pointed in the direction of the passage and said to Su Qingjun, "Go that way." Su Qingjun nodded and walked side by side with him. At the same time, Lu Chen softly told her the whole story of the discovery of this secret passage, including the butcher Rui Xiaotian who had escaped and whose identity was still unknown. Towards the end, he pointed at the ancient ruins that gradually appeared in front of them and said to Su Qingjun, "Although we still can't be sure that Butcher is a member of the devil cult, I think there's an 80 to 90% chance that he is. In fact, I've already carefully searched this secret passage once before, but I didn't find anything for the time being. It looks like that person secretly dug a tunnel again, but in the end, he ran into the boundary of the True Immortal Alliance's seal ruins, and couldn't go any further." Su Qingjun nodded, her eyes swept over the ancient bricks around, looking at the strange patterns that originated from ancient times, and finally the gravel wall that was blocked at the end of the passage. After a moment, she turned to Lu Chen and said, "In that case, you came back again tonight. Do you still have doubts in your heart?" "Well, it's true." Lu Chen nodded and walked to the side of the gravel wall. He gently touched the rough stones with his hand and said, "Although the people of the devil cult are fierce, they are not fools. This passage happened to be dug to here. One step further and it will be the legendary ancient ruins. So I have been thinking that maybe they are secretly coveting the treasures in the ancient ruins." Su Qingjun thought for a moment and said, "The legend of the ancient ruins here in Immortal City, I have heard people talking about it when I was still in Kunlun Mountain. It was said that it was the first treasure in the world. Do you think it's reliable?" Without any hesitation, Lu Chen shook his head and said, "Not reliable." Su Qingjun didn't expect him to be so straightforward. She was startled and said, "How can you be so sure?" Lu Chen said, "Firstly, this ancient relic wasn't sealed for a very long time. If there really were countless earth-shattering treasures in it, wouldn't those extraordinary people and heroes of the previous generations have swarmed to it and divided it up? Secondly, even if the legend is true, and there are indeed rare treasures that we can't imagine hidden in the ruins, if that's the case, why did the ancestors of the True Immortal Alliance seal this place by force? Obviously, if it's not that they didn't fancy the treasures here, even with their all-knowing powers and supernatural powers, they couldn't take those things out. What's more, they might have discovered something even more terrible in the depths of the ruins. In order to avoid bringing disaster to the human world, they had no choice but to seal this place." Su Qingjun was silent for a moment, nodded and said, "I didn't think so much before, but after hearing what you said today, I feel that it does make some sense." Lu Chen smiled and said, "It's just a little guess of mine, it's nothing much. Actually, I myself didn't have much interest in this ancient ruins, but after discovering this secret passage, I had an idea." "What is it?" Su Qingjun asked. Lu Chen's eyes swept across that ice-cold stone wall and said, "If this secret passage was really deliberately dug by the evil sect, then I will guess, could it be that they have discovered some unknown secret, so they are secretly probing or trying to enter?" Su Qingjun was stunned for a moment, said, "Do you think it's possible for the evil sect? This is a prohibition set up by a few deity-stage true monarchs of the previous Zhengxiameng, not to mention ordinary people. Even a highly skilled cultivator would not be able to break it." Lu Chen smiled, his expression seemed to have some subtle emotions. After a while, he was heard softly saying, "I think, no matter what, we can't underestimate them. After the number of madmen increases, it's hard to guarantee that one or two unimaginable geniuses won't suddenly appear." Lu Chen patted the stones beside him, calmly said. The two of them stayed in this tunnel for a long time, but just like before, there were almost no traces of suspicious clues, so in the end they returned without any results. After walking out of the secret passage and returning to the surface, the night breeze gently caressed their faces, making them feel somewhat comfortable. Compared to the pressure in the underground secret passage, it made them feel much more comfortable. Su Qingjun also seemed to have returned to normal, her expression somewhat cold. Probably to her, all kinds of entanglements in the world, after all, could not be so casually ignored. She coldly greeted Lu Chen, then prepared to turn and leave. At this time, Lu Chen called out to her. He actually did not have any more entanglements. he only told Su Qingjun about his residence in the alley at Shima Bridge, and briefly talked about the current situation in Immortal City. In the end, he seemed to hesitate for a moment, then said to her, although I don't know why Dead Guang Tianlan Supreme suddenly transferred a large number of your Kunlun party's elites to Immortal City to be under his command, but this person has always been farsighted and has a great vision. Once he has made up his mind to do something, it will definitely be a big matter that cannot be underestimated. Su Qingjun glanced at him, did not speak. Lu Chen said again, although Kunlun is a famous righteous sect, although the sect rules say that when you cultivate and practice martial arts, you are born to unsheathe your sword for the world's common people, righteousness and righteousness. But great matters must have great risks, sometimes it may even be unexpected. Just like the evil sect these years, although they are declining, but believe me, no matter what, you cannot underestimate them. The common people's righteousness is very good, but one's life is one's own. I don't know the trade-offs, everyone has their own views, I just want to tell you, be careful. Lu Chen looked at Su Qingjun, calmly saying. Su Qingjun was silent for a long time, but in the end, she did not say a word, only nodded slightly, then turned and left. Not long after, her figure disappeared in this dark night. The night wind blew, the peach tree next to him swayed with the wind, the grass and trees in the courtyard were quiet and lonely, leaving only Lu Chen standing here alone. He looked around, suddenly feeling a little emotional. If it was not for the blood stains on his chest, and the faint pain, perhaps the woman just now was also a bit like a dream, floating in, floating away, not leaving a trace. Life is like a dream, maybe everyone is just a passerby. Lu Chen looked at his own hand, grabbed the air, then opened it to take a look, but there was nothing, he could not grab anything. He stood on the spot and pondered for a while, suddenly said to himself, looks like I can't find anything here, should I go back and catch Atsu? That dog has a good nose, maybe he can find something. Chapter 436. Immortal Guyu of Zhengxianmeng Star Hall had always been a very low-key person, except for a few days ago when she suddenly became high-profile and invited the other 5 soul formation perfected cultivators of Zhengxianmeng to her Star Hall for a discussion. This was a grand occasion that hadn't been seen in Zhengxianmeng for many years. Of course it also caused many people to speculate, but unfortunately, these 6 high and mighty soul formation perfected cultivators were talking behind closed doors. Everyone was chased out of the Star Hall, so they could only speculate anxiously outside. What were these 6 big shots discussing? Was it going to be a big fight? Could it be that they were preparing for some earth-shattering event, or were they just chatting after not seeing each other for a long time? Well, no one believed the last possibility. Who were soul formation perfected cultivators? How would they have the time to sit and chat with you? In short, the hottest topic of conversation in Immortal City was this closed-door meeting of the 6 perfected cultivators. But on Sky Dragon Mountain, where the headquarters of Zhengxianmeng was located, it was still calm and peaceful. Everyone was doing what they were supposed to do. Life was like usual, ruling the world when they were awake, sleeping on the knees of beauties when they were drunk. This was a fairy-like life, why bother? On this day, the people of Star Hall were chased out of the hall by that immortal Guyu again. No one dared to disobey the immortal Guyu, so they all left obediently. But everyone was curious, so they walked to a place tens of feet away from the Star Hall and stood there, discussing. This year, this immortal Guyu was a bit strange. Why did he keep doing this? In the past 10 years, he had never done this, but the amiable him had complained to his subordinates several times, saying that this hall was too big. Wouldn't it be miserable to stay in it alone? Or perhaps, there would be another gathering of the 6 perfected cultivators today? This idea immediately made the people of Star Hall excited. If this was really the case, it meant that something big was really going to happen. However, such a big matter naturally couldn't stand up to careful investigation. Immediately, someone went to ask a few questions and found out that the other divine transformation perfected monarchs had no intention of coming to the Starry Hall. They were either working, meditating, daydreaming, or simply closed their doors and refused to meet guests. In short, no one came. It seemed like Guyu Supreme wanted to be alone today. This immortal is getting weirder and weirder. The people of the Starry Hall were discussing this behind his back. They were guessing with curiosity and excitement without scruples. Just as his subordinates had guessed, Supreme Guyu was sitting alone in the huge Starry Hall. Similar to the last time when the 6 Supremes held the meeting, he was sitting right below the huge dome, looking up at the dome that looked like a boundless starry sky. The Grand Star Hall was silent, without a single sound. Occasionally, a gust of wind blew in from the huge window at the side of the hall, spiraling and surging. The wind carried a piece of fallen leaf that came from nowhere, floating and finally landing silently in front of Guyu True Monarch. True Monarch Guyu calmly looked at the leaf, his eyes gradually revealing a trace of pity. Just as the leaf was about to fall to the ground, suddenly, a tall and sturdy figure appeared in front of him like a ghost. It looked like a small mountain, and with one foot, the leaf was trampled under his foot. Supreme Guyu was startled, then couldn't help but say, "Hey, you stepped on the leaf?" The person in front of him was wearing a wide robe, tall, and the most eye-catching thing was that he had a big shiny bald head. It was Supreme Tianlan. After hearing Supreme Guyu's words, Supreme Tianlan was stunned for a moment, then subconsciously took a step back and looked at the bottom of his feet. He saw that the leaf that was stepped on was half yellow half green, one side was curled up, looking dull. Supreme Tianlan frowned and said, "No way, old man, are you muddle-headed? You are actually being kind to a leaf that fell?" Supreme Guyu sighed and said, "Everything in the world has spiritual energy. Every blade of grass and every tree is a living being. This leaf didn't fall anywhere else, it was blown into this starry hall by the wind. Maybe it's a metaphor from the heavens for us." Bullshit. Supreme Tianlan scolded straightforwardly, "If you continue to be so mysterious, I'm leaving." Don't go, don't go." Supreme Guyu's expression turned serious, he put away his pity expression and put on a smile, he laughed and said, "You damn baldy, everything is good, just that your temper is too bad. After all, you have been a spirit-severing true monarch for so many years, it's not enough to just have a high cultivation level." Supreme Tianlan sat in front of him, squinted at him and sneered, "Oh, this is interesting. Tell me, other than cultivation level, what else do we need?" "We need to cultivate our mind." Supreme Guyu said frankly, pointing at his heart. He smiled and said, "You and I are both people of the highest realm in the human race, we have great power, we need to be wary, we can't manipulate politics and harm the people's lives. Moreover, we need to cultivate perseverance, and work hard for the suffering of the people in the world. We also need to have a kind heart, we need to treat people." Scram. "We have already cultivated to spirit severing, if you are still so annoying, then what's the point of cultivating so hard?" Supreme Tianlan sneered and said, "You only know how to say nice things, I haven't seen you run out to do anything good these few decades, you only know how to hide in this hall and look at the roof all day." Supreme Guyu retorted, "That's not an ordinary roof, it's a map of the stars and moon, there's a heavenly secret in it." Supreme Tianlan thought about it and said, "Great, if there's really a heavenly secret, no one in this world is better than you at playing tricks. Help me see what will happen to me in the future." Supreme Guyu was stunned and said, "Why are you asking this out of nowhere?" Supreme Guyu smiled and said, "I just wanted to ask when I saw you, why, can't I?" Supreme Guyu said, "Of course you can ask, but I can't answer you." Supreme Guyu revealed a look of disdain and said, "So, you're really playing tricks? Or are you going to come up with the excuse of not divulging the secrets of heaven and bringing disaster upon yourself if you do?" Guyu True Monarch said seriously, "That's not it. Let's not talk about the backlash of revealing the secrets of the heavens. Your cultivation is too high, and there's a strong fate covering you. The fog is deep, and the flowers cover your eyes, so I can't see clearly." Supreme Guyu looked at him and said, "Ordinary people can't do it, even you who is known as the world's best divination master can't do it?" Supreme Guyu shook his head and said, "I really can't tell." Supreme Guyu shrugged and said, "Forget it, I don't care anyway, and I'm not here for this." Supreme Guyu said, "What's the matter, tell me." Supreme Guyu thought for a moment and said, "Can you predict the exact date of the appearance of the blood moon that you mentioned previously?" Supreme Gu shook his head and said, no. After a pause, he added, at least not now. Perfected Lord Tianlan replied with a but his expression did not change much. It seemed that he was not very surprised by this answer. He quickly changed the topic and said, all right, do me a favor. Help me divine something. What is it? 2 leaves and a seed. Chapter 437. True Monarch Gu had a strange look on her face as she took out a large pile of items from somewhere, a large and beautiful hawksbill turtle shell, 4 or 5 black stones that emitted a cold light, an 8 trigram plate, a purple gold 3-legged dragon tiger cauldron, 6 or 7 incense sticks, a piece of something that looked like broken tree bark, a stack of yellow talismans, a talisman brush and cinnabar, and so on. Even with true Lord Tianlan's experience, he was a little shocked. Seeing true Lord Gu leisurely arranging the items around him, he couldn't help but ask, I say, it's just a simple divination, do you really need to bring so many items? True Lord Gu said indifferently, that's why I look down on outsiders like you. You don't know anything and talk a lot of nonsense. Divination is about fate, calculating the secrets of the heavens. How many people can do it since ancient times? Do you think that the streets below the immortal city are filled with people who draw lots to tell fortunes and cheat people of money? True Lord Tianlan frowned and his expression became more serious. He sized up True Lord Gu and nodded, you're right, now that you mention it, you're indeed much more imposing than those fortune tellers on the streets. Nonsense, these are all genuine abilities. And these items, they're all treasures. True Lord Gu pointed at the many artifacts in front of him and said proudly, do you see that turtle shell? It's a South Sea hawksbill turtle. Those 5 black stones, don't think that they're eye-catching, they're actually outer space black meteorites. And this, tree bark? Wrong, this is 1,000-year agarwood, and... He muttered to himself for a while. Sure enough, every single item laid out on the ground was a rare treasure or peerless spiritual material. Even though some of them looked ordinary, they were actually priceless treasures. After True Lord Tianlan finished listening, he looked at True Lord Gu and smiled, you old thing, you actually hid so many good things all these years, I couldn't tell. I can't compare to you guys. Perfected Gu smiled and then looked at Perfected Lord Tianlan meaningfully. I only have a little toy in my hand for fun. If you really want to do something big, you won't be interested in it and won't need it. You need to think of another way. After pondering for a moment, Perfected Lord Tianlan leaned forward slightly and asked in a low voice, what is it? Gu True Monarch said indifferently, whoever manages money is the richest. Perfected Lord Tianlan didn't seem to be surprised by Perfected Lord Gu's words, but his eyes obviously lit up. He looked at the master of Starry Hall without blinking and said, it's a big fat sheep over there, but there's too much money and goods. The jackals, wolves, tigers, and leopards that they're raising are also astonishing. I'm afraid it won't be easy to get them. Gu True Monarch sneered and said, don't pretend. Sheep are the only things that can be reared in a sheep pen. Aren't the real wolves and tigers on Sky Dragon Mountain under Black Shadow? Perfected Lord Tianlan stared at him for a long time and suddenly clapped his hands and sighed, I've misjudged. I didn't expect the most cunning person on this mountain to be you. To think that I've been keeping an eye on those people for so many years. Now that I think about it, I'm really shocked and ashamed. Perfected Lord Gu shook his head, you don't have to belittle yourself or think too highly of me. I'm old and I don't have much time left. The people in Starry Hall are all mediocre. Even if I want to do something, I won't be able to do much, not to mention fight against those ferocious tigers and wolves of yours. Perfected Lord Tianlan said, you've always played safe in the past. Why did you suddenly stand out this time? Because the blood moon is near. Perfected Lord Gu said without hesitation, great changes are coming and it's hard to predict whether it'll be a blessing or a curse. It's fine if everyone is muddling along, but you're the only one with a murderous aura. You've been having so much fun by yourself all these years. I'm afraid you're ready now. Perfected Lord Tian Lan hesitated for a moment and nodded. It's about time. Perfected Lord Guyu pointed at him and seemed to be speechless. He put down his hand helplessly and said, "That's why I say, if I have to choose, I'm not like those idiots below. I've secretly watched you for so many years and seen your methods. If I don't stand on your side, wouldn't I be an idiot?" Perfected Lord Tian Lan smiled. "You can play safe. As long as you don't stand out, you know I won't make things difficult for you." Bullsh *T. Perfected Lord Guyu scolded. "You want me to pretend that I don't see these mountains of wealth? Cultivation doesn't need money, enjoyment doesn't need money, being a virgin every day, using pills and cauldrons to live forever, and raising such a bunch of useless people doesn't need money?" Perfected Lord Tian Lan was stunned for a moment and nodded. "You're right." Then, his expression turned serious and he said solemnly, "Great things are actually difficult and dangerous. How can it be so easy to be on the line between life and death? But if you help me, it'll be like giving me charcoal in snowy weather and adding wings to a tiger. I'm willing to make a deal with you. After the matter is done, we'll split the profits equally. I won't go back on my words." Perfected Lord Guyu looked at him and after a moment of silence said, "No." Perfected Lord Tian Lan's expression changed slightly but his tone was still very polite. "Then please tell me, Brother Guyu." Perfected Lord Guyu said, "I'll take 20% and you take 80%. Perfected Lord Tian Lan's face revealed a surprised expression as he didn't expect Perfected Lord Guyu to propose such a disadvantageous condition. "Why is that?" True Monarch Guyu smiled bitterly, but said calmly, "Because you are too strong, your killing nature is too strong, and your subordinates are vicious and bloodthirsty. If the plan succeeds, it will definitely be your side that puts in more effort. At that time, I will get too many things, and that will be the path to disaster. 20%, I only want 20%. Perfected Lord Guyu stretched out 2 fingers and said, "Young Master Qian, be content with what you have. At that time, you'll probably care about my past relationship and won't be too embarrassed to do anything to me." Perfected Lord Tian Lan stared at Guyu for a long time and nodded slowly. He sighed and said, "In my entire life, other than my teacher ancestor Tian Hong, I've never respected anyone. It is only today that Brother Guyu has made me feel respect. I don't respect your Tao arts and divine arts, I don't respect your forces, I only respect your wisdom and understanding of the world." Perfected Lord Guyu waved his hand and said that he didn't dare to accept it. He raised his head and looked up at the dome of the hall. The vast sky was filled with stars, deep and unpredictable. Darkness filled the air but he still couldn't see the legendary blood moon. Let me ask you something." Perfected Lord Guyu said. "Speak." Perfected Lord Guyu skillfully burned the incense for divination while wiping the hawksbill star stone with a serious expression. At the same time, he casually asked Perfected Lord Tian Lan, "I remember that there are a total of 4 divine tree treasures passed down in the demonic cult. They are 1 branch, 2 leaves and 1 seed. Why do you only want me to divine the divine leaf and the divine seed? Don't you want to divine the branch too?" Perfected Lord Tian Lan said indifferently, "No need, I've already found the branch." Chapter 438. Found it? True Lord Guyu was clearly startled and seemed to want to ask a few more questions. However, he quickly thought of something and after looking at True Lord Tian Lan's expression, he silently nodded and did not mention anything else. It's still unclear whether something like the heaven and earth god tree exists or not. The people from the devil cult believe it without a doubt, while we from the righteous path scoff at it. However, at our level, our way of thinking is different from ordinary people. Guyu took the huge and gorgeous 10,000-year-old hawksbill turtle and placed it in front of him. At the same time, he said indifferently, "But what we can be sure of is that the 4 treasures of the heaven tree passed down by the devil cult are definitely not ordinary items. They might even contain divinity spiritual energy, so it's very easy for them to be concealed by the power of divination. According to the saying of our divination, it's probably because spiritual objects are naturally protected by fate." True Lord Tian Lan nodded his head and said, I've heard of this saying before. Divination is very popular in the world, but there are many people who pretend to be gods and ghosts. Most of them are liars, or they've only learned a little and are not capable enough. The items that I want to divine are divine objects. After thinking about it, only you have the ability to do so. Guyu picked up the few black meteorites and held them in his hand. With a trace of arrogance on his face, he said, "You're right." After saying that, he shook his wrist and threw the few black stones on the shell of the hawksbill turtle. A few of the black stones started spinning non-stop. One of the stones that was spinning the fastest even let out a slight whistling sound. Perfected Lord Tianlan's gaze also fell on the stones that were spinning in circles. At the same time, he said casually, "I say, you've taken out so many priceless heavenly and earthly treasures here. Is it really that difficult to divine those divine objects?" Guyu did not answer him. Instead, he took the 1,000-year-old agarwood and broke it in half with 2 fingers. Even with his status, a pained expression flashed across his face. However, he did not hesitate. He rubbed the agarwood in his hand and it instantly turned into powder. Then, it slowly fell from the sky and landed on the hawksbill turtle's shell and the spinning black stones. Perfected Lord Guyu looked at Perfected Lord Tianlan. "Hey, let me borrow your pure yang true fire." True Lord Tianlan laughed. He did not ask much nor did he make any posture preparations. He flipped his palm and pressed it down. A thick and heavy aura suddenly appeared in the starry hall. After a while, a flame that was almost pure white and even carried a hint of gold surged out from his palm and landed on the shell of the hawksbill turtle. The flame seemed gentle and harmless, but even someone like true Lord Guyu had a slight change in expression when he saw it. In fact, in this world, this seemingly inconspicuous flame divine ability was almost one of the most powerful dharmic powers. Even soul formation perfected monarchs had to be wary of such flames. However, the preciousness of heavenly treasures and rare spiritual materials was finally revealed at this moment. Under the pure yang true fire that seemed harmless, but was actually terrifyingly powerful and could melt anything, the 10,000-year-old hawksbill turtle and the black meteorite did not move at all, and did not show any reaction. However, in contrast, the 1,000-year-old agarwood ignited when it came into contact with fire. It instantly burned and turned into ashes. Then, a strong fragrance instantly surged out like a flood and filled the entire starry hall in the blink of an eye. True Lord Guyu slowly retracted his hand and looked at the black meteorite that was gradually slowing down on the hawksbill turtle's shell. He suddenly said, "You asked me if adding these treasures to the divination ceremony was useful?" "Yes." True Lord Guyu said, "Actually, there's not much of a use. At least, when I did this in the past, I didn't feel that my spirit energy was stronger, my mental state was better, or any other particularly powerful effects." True Lord Tianlan was shocked and looked at him in confusion. "If that's the case, why did you still? But some things in this world just don't make sense." True Lord Guyu said, "I've tried many times in the past. It was clearly me who did the divination and the state before and after were similar or even almost the same. However, I couldn't divine most of the time without adding these treasures. Although I didn't succeed every time after adding these seemingly useless treasures, the chances of a good outcome increased by at least 50%. He looked at True Lord Tianlan helplessly. "That's how it is. I don't know why either. Can you see anything?" True Lord Tianlan was also stunned and didn't know what to say. After a while, he said, "There's actually such a strange thing?" True Lord Guyu took the purple gold 3-legged dragon tiger cauldron that looked luxurious and extravagant. He lit 3 incense sticks and inserted them into the cauldron and placed it beside the hawksbill turtle. After a moment of silence, he said, "Tianlan, people like us who have cultivated our entire lives to reach this realm shouldn't believe in the will of the gods anymore." True Lord Tianlan said, "I don't believe it." True Lord Guyu nodded. "I didn't believe it at first either. But all these years, I always felt that there seemed to be an inexplicable force in the unseen world. It can't be seen or touched, but I can vaguely sense it." He pointed at the things in front of him and said, "Let's take divination for example. Sometimes, I'll think that maybe there's really a god or a god hiding in a place that we can't see. Divination is to predict the fate and the future. How can it be so easy? Even if you have the ability to do so, if you don't add these precious and rare treasures and offer them as a tribute, why would the God of heavens will let you see those things for nothing? Do you think what I said makes sense? He asked True Lord Tianlan. True Lord Tianlan looked at him and suddenly grinned. Then, he said, to put it simply, you're giving good things to what you think is the will of the gods. After bribing them, they'll give you benefits and you'll be considered to have succeeded. Right? True Lord Gu thought about it and couldn't help but laugh. That seems to be the case. True Lord Tianlan shook his head. I don't believe that. After a pause, he said, even if there really is a god, it won't hinder my determination. True Lord Gu seemed to have expected such an answer. He nodded calmly and closed his eyes. After an unknown period of time, the purple gold incense burner was surrounded by green smoke. The black stone on the hawksbill turtle stopped moving and formed a strange pattern. The surrounding fragrance was rich, and Guyu True Monarch's body suddenly trembled. Then, she suddenly shook violently and a trace of blood flowed down from the corner of her mouth. True Lord Tianlan's expression was solemn. After a while, True Lord Guyu opened his eyes. His voice was also a little hoarse. He said softly, these few divine objects of the demonic cult are really powerful. True Lord Tianlan took a deep breath and said, how is it? True Lord Guyu said, among the leaves, one is still in the south and the other is now in this immortal city. Also, that seed has the strongest divine power. The backlash I suffered is because of that. True Lord Tianlan was a little nervous and asked, can you see the whereabouts of the seed? True Lord Guyu hesitated and said slowly, if I'm not wrong, the seed is now in the immortal city. Perfected Lord Tianlan's expression changed abruptly as his eyes lit up. Chapter 439. Old Ma, are you asleep? Not yet. What's wrong? In the dead of night, in the bedroom of the Shima Qiao residence, Lu Chen, who was lying on the bed, and Old Ma, who was making a mattress on the floor, were still awake. The only one who was asleep was probably Atsu, who was lying on the other side. Lu Chen was lying flat on the bed, his eyes looking at the dark roof, or perhaps he was simply staring at the darkness. After a moment of silence, he said, I met Su Qingjun. There was a little noise coming from the ground beside the bed. It came from Old Ma's side. After a while, Old Ma asked with slight surprise, where did you meet her? Lu Chen said, in the butcher's house. I bought 2 pots of wine that day. Later, I found that there seemed to be someone following me, so I went around and planned to make a move. But then I found out that it was her. Old Ma paused and said, the wound on your chest. Lu Chen said, she stabbed me. Old Ma suddenly became silent. After a while, he seemed to smile bitterly and said, well, at least she didn't really kill you. You did such a thing in the Su family that year. It's not surprising that she fell out with you. Lu Chen was silent for a moment and said, I don't regret it. Old Ma said, I didn't say that you regret it, nor did I say that you did something wrong. Sumo is really bad. She did so many evil things, killed Exian, and even abused you. She should have been killed. It's just that Su Qingjun isn't a bad girl. From her point of view, you killed her younger brother in front of her and her parents. It's only right and proper for her to seek revenge on you. Lu Chen sighed and said, I know. I don't blame her. Old Ma suddenly smiled and said, but she actually let you go even though her sword stabbed into your chest. Is she really interested in you? Lu Chen's eyes flashed in the darkness, then he calmed down and said, don't talk nonsense. She is still a knowledgeable woman. Unlike her parents, she knows what is right and wrong. These years, she also secretly learned the truth, so that's why she didn't kill me that day. Old Ma turned over on the ground and looked at Lu Chen's figure on the bed. How is her cultivation and strength now? Lu Chen pondered for a moment and said, very strong. Compared to the time when I was at Kunlun Mountain, I have improved a lot. Among the cultivators below the nascent soul realm in Kunlun sect, even if I'm not the strongest, I'm one of the few. Old Ma clicked his tongue and said with some emotion, "Sigh, people really can't be compared with others. Especially with talented people like you, it can really piss people off." He paused as if he thought of something and asked, "What about you? You fought with her. What was the result? You were beaten to the point that you couldn't fight back?" Lu Chen thought for a moment and said, "It should be a draw." Old Ma laughed and scolded, "You were almost stabbed to death by her, and you still have the nerve to say it was a draw?" Lu Chen also laughed, but didn't say anything else. After a while, he sighed soundlessly in the darkness. "I was thinking, why did the damn Baldy summon a Kunlun party elite like Su Qingjun to Immortal City? And I heard that there were a few powerful Yuanying state Jinren who came with her. What does he want to do?" Hearing Lu Chen mention that Tianlan Supreme, Old Ma's words suddenly became cautious. After thinking for a while, he said in a low voice, "How can we guess this kind of thing? Maybe Lord Supreme has a big game of chess in his mind. For example, he wants to deal with the devil cult." Old Ma tried to give an answer. "Yes." Lu Chen also turned over on the bed and said to the edge of the bed, "Of course this is one of the reasons. Now it seems that both inside and outside the devil cult are saying the same thing. It's just that since the Battle of the Barren Valley more than 10 years ago until now, although there are still some remnants of the devil cult jumping out to cause trouble from time to time, but from the overall situation, I don't think they are worth such a big fight." Old Ma coughed and said, "I say, didn't you always insist on chasing after the devil cult and never let down your guard?" Lu Chen snorted and said, "Of course I think so, and my thinking has not changed. But to be honest, do you think that now, not to mention the whole Zhengxiameng, even the strength in Fuyunji will be weaker than the devil cult?" Old Ma was silent for a while and said, "Fuyunji is mysterious and unpredictable. Even if we are in the picture, we can't see it clearly. The only one who can control the overall situation is probably Lord Supreme, maybe with Shuang. But if we really have to face it head-on, I still choose Fuyunji. It's stronger here." "That's right. The Fuyan Agency and the Devil's Sect have been fighting and killing each other for dozens of years. How many experts and assassins are hidden in the darkness? No one can say for sure. It's precisely because we're inside that we know how terrifying this power is." Lu Chen said, "But it's also because of this that I can't figure out why the damn Baldy still wants to strengthen his force, even mobilizing the elites from the Kunlun party. Maybe, what he wants to deal with in the future is not necessarily only the devil cult." Old Ma suddenly stopped talking. After a while, he slowly sat up in the dark. He first glanced at Lu Chen, then sat on the edge of the bed and leaned against it. He sighed and said softly, "You think too much." Lu Chen looked at Old Ma's silhouette in the dark and said calmly, "Am I wrong?" Old Ma shook his head and said, "I don't know. Maybe you're not wrong. It's just that people like us, why do we think so much and think so deeply?" Lu Chen faintly said, "If I don't think more, if I don't think deeply, I would have died in the devil cult. I've been used to it for so many years, I can't change it." All right, Old Ma waved his hand like he was surrendering. Then he casually asked, "A person who thinks deeply, then tell me, other than the devil cult, who else does our master want to deal with that he needs to use such a big force?" Lu Chen said, "You can't think of it?" Old Ma said, "I can't think of it. Now that the world has been peaceful for so many years, only our Zhengxiameng dominates." Halfway through his sentence, he suddenly stopped speaking. After sitting there for a while, Old Ma turned his head and looked at Lu Chen. Lu Chen also looked at him. "There's no need for this, right?" After a long time, Old Ma suddenly asked faintly. Lu Chen snorted and said, "You have to ask that damn Baldy, it's useless to me." Old Ma thought for a while, lowered his voice and said softly, "I still don't think it's possible. No matter how you look at it, there's no reason to do this. And if it's really so, there's a few enemies, and their strengths are also shockingly strong. We may not be able to defeat them. Now that only this group of people has been transferred here, it can be said that it's to deal with the devil cult. Anyway, few outsiders know the real strength of Fuyunji. But what if this is only the first batch? What if there are more people coming over? Lu Chen said, what if that damn Baldy becomes ruthless and directly brings all the masters of the Kunlun party to Immortal City? Are you crazy? Old Ma said. What if that damn Baldy is really a madman? Lu Chen asked back. Old Ma was tongue-tied and suddenly had nothing to say. Chapter 440. Black Dog Atu rolled over on the ground and grunted a few times. Perhaps it was dreaming about something, but it soon fell back into a deep sleep. The bedroom was still dark and quiet. For a while, Lu Chen and Old Ma did not speak. After a long time, Old Ma sat on the edge of the bed and said in a low voice, "It's the middle of the night. Why are you suddenly telling me this instead of sleeping?" Lu Chen was silent for a while and said, "I have no one to tell except you." All right. Old Ma smiled bitterly and said, "Although what I said before is a little exaggerated, but if you really want to think about it carefully, it is not completely impossible, although you think there is only a small possibility of this kind of thing?" Lu Chen interrupted him and asked. After being questioned by Lu Chen, Old Ma thought for a while and then suddenly cursed in the dark. Then he said, "Damn it, it seems very possible." Lu Chen snorted and said, "Both of us have been working with that damned Baldy for more than a decade now. Even though his heart is as deep as the ocean and unfathomable, we can still more or less sense some of the clues. I only ask you one thing now, if in the future. Do you think the devil cult is easier to deal with, or those people in Zhengxiameng are easier?" Old Ma had always been cautious, but after chatting with Lu Chen for so long tonight, his mind was a little agitated and unconsciously became bolder. After a moment of silence, he said in a deep voice, "Before the Battle of the Barren Valley more than 10 years ago, I might have chosen the devil cult, but now, it must be our allies." Lu Chen nodded and said, "I think so too." After a pause, he continued, "This matter is really too big, and the strength of the people over there is almost impossible to estimate. If they really fight, it will be an earth-shattering battle. No matter who wins or loses, Tianlong Mountain will certainly be covered with blood." Old Ma nodded slowly and said, "Most likely." Old Ma's body trembled slightly as he thought of the terrifying scene that might happen in the future. He felt his hair stand on end. Lu Chen patted his shoulder and whispered, "What's wrong? Are you scared?" Old Ma snorted coldly and said, "I haven't lived long enough. I don't want to die yet." "I don't want to die either," Lu Chen said. "Then what do you mean?" Old Ma asked. "You suddenly talk to me so much tonight. You're not just complaining, are you? Or could it be that you already have an idea in your heart?" In the beginning, Old Ma's tone was still very calm, but towards the end, he suddenly became a little excited. He moved closer to Lu Chen and looked at his face in the darkness. He lowered his voice and said softly, "I say, could it be that you really have an idea?" Lu Chen looked at him and suddenly laughed. "I remember that you often advised me to wholeheartedly work for that damn Baldy. Why did you suddenly change your mind this time?" Old Ma was silent for a moment and said, "Lord Perfected has always been good to me, and I have always been loyal to him. However, if there really is an earth-shattering change in the future, it will be very difficult for me to survive because of my low ability. Besides, to put it bluntly, I am different from you. You may be a talent that Lord Perfected values, but I am actually just a dispensable person. Even if the sun and moon are renewed in the future, and the universe is reversed, and you are rewarded according to your contributions, you can achieve meteoric success, but what can I earn? Besides, I actually don't really want to die. Therefore, I was thinking that if I can have a way out." "You think I can achieve meteoric success?" Lu Chen interrupted him and asked. Old Ma hesitated but finally nodded and said, "Yes, we have been brothers and friends for so many years, this is what I really mean. I think Lord Perfected still thinks highly of you. As long as you can help him achieve great things and make great contributions, as long as you don't die, he will definitely. Lu Chen lightly said, although I have been risking my life in the evil sect for so many years and seem to be indifferent to life and death, but actually I really don't want to die. Whether it is for that damn Baldy or some illusory righteousness and justice, I still don't want to die. As for meteoric success, don't mention it. Old Ma took a deep breath and said, well, since we have already said it like this, do you have any idea? Yes. Lu Chen leaned close to Old Ma's ear and whispered. That voice was unusually low, only Old Ma could hear it. Old Ma frowned in the darkness and listened carefully. After a while, Lu Chen finished. Old Ma thought for a while, shook his head and said, no, your idea is too risky and it will be easily detected by others. Lu Chen was slightly surprised and said, well, then do you have a better idea? Old Ma was silent for a moment and said, don't be anxious, let's think about this carefully. Anyway, there should still be time. No matter what, this concerns both of our lives, we must strive for perfection. Lu Chen grunted and said, then what should we do about pursuing the demonic cult now? Old Ma asked back, what do you think? Lu Chen said lightly, deal with it first. It's best if we can find out, but if not, then drag it on. Anyway, the evil sect is very mysterious, it's normal that we can't find them. Maybe we can find an excuse to search for the evil sect and leave Immortal City first. Old Ma's eyes lit up and said, hey, this is a good idea, but it's too difficult to hide it from Lord True Lord. Lu Chen seemed to have similar concerns. After nodding, he said, let's see first. Both of them said nothing and then went to sleep. But in the deep night, no one knew that in this darkness, some people's hearts were already slightly disturbed. The next morning, Bai Lian woke up early as usual. After changing her clothes, she took a stroll in the courtyard. After a while, she saw the door opposite her open. It was Atu, the black dog, running out with its tail wagging. It then laid on the grass and stretched its back. After a yawn, it became energetic again and started playing around the courtyard. White Lotus walked over. Atsu glanced at her and took a few steps back vigilantly. White Lotus was a little unhappy. She glared at Atsu and said, you mutt, you have no conscience. How long have I known you, and we've interacted a lot. I haven't harmed you much, not counting that year, at least after we met this time, I haven't done anything to you, right? How can you be so stingy? Atsu stared at her and wagged its tail, but it still didn't have any intention of coming closer. White Lotus became more and more annoyed. But at this time, there was a sound from the other side of the door. It was Lu Chen and Old Ma walking out. Lu Chen saw White Lotus and greeted her, then said directly to her, last time when we entered the city, didn't you get a big carriage that could fit Atsu and a few of us? Yes, what's wrong? Asked White Lotus. Lu Chen said, can you get another one? I want to use that carriage again today. White Lotus was startled and said, of course, that's not a problem. But where are you going? You'll know when the time comes, said Lu Chen. About an hour later, White Lotus sat in the spacious carriage, looking at the familiar house outside through the curtain with a complicated expression. Behind the high wall, did the peach blossoms wither? Chapter 441. What are we doing here again? White Lotus was the first to ask Lu Chen when the three people and a dog arrived at the increasingly desolate house. Lu Chen pointed to the underground secret passage and said, let's go down and check again. White Lotus looked a little reluctant. She frowned and said, this place should have been searched long ago. Didn't we find anything? Wouldn't it be a waste of time to come again? I say, are you two men so free? Martial Uncle Tianlan asked you to help him. Why do I feel that you are deliberately slacking off? Lu Chen shook his head and said, how can this be called slacking off? The last time I came here, I really didn't find any clues related to the devil cult. But later I thought about it carefully. The butcher who ran away is still very likely to be a devil of the devil cult. So we still need to search this place carefully. Maybe we may find something new. White Lotus looked like she didn't believe him. She said very frankly, "You must have searched carefully the last time. Did you check every corner under the secret passage, especially near the gravel wall? Why can't we find it last time, but this time we can?" Lu Chen coughed and then said seriously, "What you said actually makes a lot of sense. So after learning from the painful experience, I brought Atsu here this time. This dog Atsu is very talented and is very good at tracking, much better than us practitioners. So I want to bring it here to have a look. Maybe it can find something." He paused and then said, "If even Atsu can't find anything, then forget it. I will completely give up on this place and never come back again." White Lotus glanced at the black dog standing beside Lu Chen. It was wagging its tail slightly and looking around curiously. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. After a while, she smiled reluctantly and silently walked aside. Lu Chen and Old Ma began to prepare on the spot, such as torches and flint. After all, it was very dark after going down the secret passage. During this time, they saw White Lotus walk to the peach tree alone and stand a little far away from them. Old Ma took the opportunity to ask Lu Chen, "I just wanted to ask you the same question as White Lotus. Last night, didn't we secretly discuss that if something big happens in the future, we will run away? In this case, before that, I thought we could only muddle along and pretend. We have to think of a way to escape in private. Why do you look like you are still working very seriously?" Lu Chen glanced at him and said, "Running away in the future and chasing after the devil cult are two different things. These two have nothing to do with each other, we have to think of a way. But for the devil cult, we still have to chase after them." Old Ma rolled his eyes and mumbled, "All right, I hope before we think of a way to escape, we won't be killed by those lunatics from the devil cult first." Lu Chen glanced at him and smiled, "Don't worry, look at how many years I've been dealing with the devil cult and I'm still alive and kicking. What's there to be afraid of?" Old Ma spat and said, "You can brag to anyone in the world but don't brag in front of me. I've seen how you were in Enchanting village for the past 10 years. Lu Chen laughed heartily and his laughter traveled to the peach tree. White Lotus turned her head and looked over. With an annoyed expression, she shouted, "Hey, why are you two grown men dilly-dallying like this? Are the torches ready? If they're ready, come over quickly." The flowers on the peach tree had not withered yet. The peach blossoms were still blooming beautifully in the wind. However, there were still signs of decay at the edges of the branches. Some of the petals had withered, and some of the leaves had curled up. When the wind blew, more petals and leaves fell down. When they walked past the peach tree, Old Ma glanced at it and said, "The peach blossoms are blooming well." Lu Chen nodded and said, "Yes, they've been blooming for a long time and they haven't withered yet." With a whoosh, the torch streaked across the air. Lu Chen took it from Old Ma and was the first to walk into the secret passage. At the same time, he whistled and the black dog immediately ran over. Just as Lu Chen was about to tell it to follow him, Atsu glanced at the dark hole and ran down without hesitation. It was as if it was not afraid of the darkness at all. It didn't look like it was its first time here at all. Lu Chen was startled and called out to Atsu, but Atsu had already walked into the darkness. Lu Chen shook his head and said, "This dog is a little strange today." Although he said that, Lu Chen didn't care too much. He held the torch and walked down. Behind him, White Lotus had a complicated expression on her face. She looked at Lu Chen's back and then followed him without saying a word. Old Ma walked at the back with a torch in his hand. Although he had known this place for a long time, he had never come down this underground secret passage. Today was the first time. Before walking down the stone steps and entering this secret passage, his eyes swept across the seemingly desolate and dilapidated courtyard. Finally, his eyes stopped on the blooming peach tree for a moment. He seemed to frown slightly, but his footsteps didn't stop. The darkness spread over and swallowed his figure. The huge immortal city was located on the fertile Four Rivers plain and nurtured countless living beings. There were countless secrets hidden in this huge city without city walls, but there were also countless dark corners that no one knew about. Most people in the world knew of the evil devil cult. In the past many years, they were afraid of this cult and kept a respectful distance from it. But there were also people who stood up bravely and fought against the devil cult for the sake of the common people and justice. They tried their best to block this terrible devil cult from people's sight and life. There were many such people, but the most famous one was of course the world-famous true Lord Tianlan. He and the Fuyunji that he founded single-handedly fought against the devil cult for decades. They never stopped and never retreated. They paid a heavy and bloody price in exchange for today's peace. This was a statement that many people heard and believed, because it was true. The number one enemy of the devil cult today was Fuyunji. But in Zhengxianmeng, including the organization Fuyunji, although they would never admit it on the surface, many people knew clearly that in this Zhengxianmeng headquarters, in the most powerful immortal city in Fuyunji, in this ostentatious and comfortable city, the devil cult was lurking here. For so many years, the devil cult had been hunted down, slaughtered, and tried every means to exterminate them. But this evil cult still stubbornly survived. And until now, people still couldn't find any trace of the devil cult in the immortal city. Knowing that their terrible enemies were in this immortal city, but they couldn't find them, and every night, they would be afraid that those madmen in the dark would suddenly rush out and start a massacre. What kind of feeling was this? Shuang had such an unusually complicated feeling. She was a beautiful woman, but it had been many years since a man dared to get close to her. Sometimes, she would secretly fantasize about it in her heart, but very soon, she would chase this weak thought out of her mind. Especially on this day, when she was in a daze, she suddenly received a secret report. Fuyunji's spies in the immortal city suddenly reported that they had found a person who looked very much like the leader of the devil cult in the western continent, Fan Tui. Shui Ying's expression was cold, but she instantly felt a surge of hot blood in her heart. She secretly clenched her fists. It's here, it's finally here. In this world, there was only one person who could make Fan Tui leave his base in the western continent and sneak into the immortal city. That was the only remaining and most mysterious leader of the devil cult, Elder Ghost. Chapter 442. Fuyunji was founded by true Lord Tianlan. They had been working hard in the immortal city for decades, and had the support of Zhengxianmeng and true Lord Tianlan. Naturally, they were like fish in water, and their influence reached every corner of the immortal city. Of course, no matter how powerful Fuyunji was, it was impossible for them to know everything and grasp all the secrets. For example, they had been tracking for decades and still could not find the evil cult stronghold hidden in the immortal city, and could not catch the mysterious Elder Ghost. But if one looked down on Fuyunji because of this, it would be a big mistake. No matter how bad the evil cult was, they once had the glory of being the best in the world. But because they were too extreme and made too many enemies, they gradually weakened. Especially the battle in the Barren Valley 10 years ago, it was a watershed. The evil cult suffered a great loss in that battle. 7 to 8 out of 10 of their elites were gone, and from then on, they were completely on the decline. As for the main culprit in this matter, it was none other than the Floating Clouds Company. After that, Fuyunji's reputation flourished, and could be said to have entered the most powerful and prosperous era since its founding. Even in the whole of Zhengxianmeng, it was one of the most powerful halls, which made people raise their eyebrows. And in the recent 10 over years, the Fuyunci still did not have the intention to let off the evil faction. Not only did they persist in pursuing and killing the remaining evil faction members, they also pursued the only remaining leader, Elder Ghost, relentlessly, with the intention of killing him. This was almost an open secret, and Elder Ghost and the remaining evil faction organizations hiding in the immortal city were even more cautious, like birds startled by the mere twang of a bough, desperately hiding in the darkest places, also waiting. Shuang and her subordinates, including the killers and shadows who were also hiding in the dark, had been chasing after the last demon for so many years, but had never succeeded. There were a few times when they seemed to be so close, but in the end, Elder Ghost still escaped. And in this process, although the remaining evil cult members suffered heavy losses, Fuyunji also paid a hefty price. Many people lost their lives forever in the fighting in the dark. Both sides were already a blood feud that would not end until one side was dead. And this time, it seemed that a new opportunity had come. Since the birth of Fuyunji, it had always carried a strong and unyielding temperament. Whether it was the words and deeds of this organization, or the means that seemed to be as fierce or even crueler than the devil cult, it had an unusually bright color. It was also obviously different from the ethereal and fairy-like image that most of the other halls of Zhengxiameng were born with. Even though the leader of this generation of Fuyunji was a beautiful and charming woman, it seemed that this woman's methods were more ruthless and cruel than most men's. There were many people in Zhengxiameng who disliked Fuyunji. But at least for now, no one could do anything to them. Therefore, Fuyunji appeared to be extremely arrogant and powerful. However, for Blood Warbler, who was in charge of Fuyunji, life was not as glamorous as it seemed. The world was dangerous. Sometimes, she even felt that the friendly forces were more troublesome than the cruel devil cult. However, life had to be lived. The devil cult had to be eradicated first. After receiving the news that the leader of the Western Continent's devil cult, Fan Tui, had suddenly entered the Celestial City, Blood Warbler was pleasantly surprised. However, she quickly calmed down and immediately made detailed arrangements. She mobilized the forces of Fuyunji and started to closely monitor this person. Yes, they were only monitoring him, not capturing him. In Blood Warbler's heart, no one could compare to that damned, cunning elder ghost, who had been in hiding for many years. As long as they could capture and kill that evildoer, then suppress him with the powerful forces of Fuyunji, even if the devil cult was not completely destroyed, it would not be able to make a comeback for at least 30 to 50 years. This matter was so important that Blood Warbler even put down everything she was doing and personally went to the scene to direct the arrangements. Of course, with the abilities of Fuyunji and the potential of operating in the Celestial City for many years, they were almost omnipotent. If they were willing, they could even replace their spies in every shop on the entire street. Blood Warbler sat in a tea house with a veil over her face. The customers around her all looked very quiet and casual, maintaining a certain distance from her. Occasionally, the waiter in the shop would come over with a teapot to add water for her. At the same time, information was continuously being passed on through the notes left between the waiter's fingers. Fan Tui had already entered the city. Fan Tui had entered the White Tiger City district. He was walking alone, and he did not see any accomplices. Fan Tui entered a flower shop on the other side of the long street. Fan Tui left the flower shop and continued to walk forward. The flower shop had already been surrounded by us. Fan Tui bought an old book from a roadside vendor. The owner of the flower shop had already been detained. Fan Tui looked around the street, as though he was looking for something. The owner of the flower shop had no problems. The vendor was brought to the side for questioning. Fan Tui stopped in front of a tavern, looking as though he wanted to enter. The vendor had no problems and was released. Blood Warbler, who was sitting in the tea house, calmly glanced out of the window. She saw that Fan Tui was standing in front of the tavern on the opposite side of the street. He first looked around casually, then pushed open the door and walked in. Blood Warbler frowned and stared at the tavern for a while. She suddenly waved her hand, and a man immediately walked over. He stood beside her with his hands clasped behind his back. Blood Warbler said, "This 3 Mile Fragrance tavern sounds familiar. Is it on the list we had in the past?" Without hesitation, the man said, "It's this place. We had suspected a chef in the past, but we could not find any evidence, so we recorded it as suspicious. After that, we handed this place over to Old Ma and the rest according to our orders. Our people have not come here since." Blood Warbler grunted and said, "There's probably something wrong with this tavern. Where are the people from Old Ma's side?" The man paused for a moment, then said, "We just looked. Not a single one of them came today." A hint of anger immediately flashed across Blood Warbler's face. Fortunately, the veil covering her face blocked it. After a while, she said in a low voice, "Ignore them. The bigger picture is more important. Bring some people in and see if those demons from the devil's sect are up to no good." This order was quickly passed down, and after a short while, one could see some changes in the tranquility of the long street. Some passers-by laughed as they approached, some hawkers carried their goods and walked nearby, and some beggars sat near the tavern, looking pitiful as they begged for money from the passers-by. There were 2 or 3 groups of people. Some looked like husband and wife, some were friends chatting and laughing, and some were muscular men of few words. They entered the tavern separately. The weather looked clear and the streets were bustling, just like it had been every other day. At a certain moment, Shuang, who was sitting in the tea house, suddenly had a slight change in expression, as if she had sensed something. She abruptly stood up, but at the same time, a deafening sound suddenly rang out from the tavern called 3 Mile Fragrance. Boom! The deafening sound seemed to be heard by the entire immortal city. It reverberated between heaven and earth and did not dissipate for a long time. Chapter 443. A huge roar rang out in an instant. Before the crowd could react, they felt the ground beneath their feet suddenly tremble violently. It was as if an earth dragon had turned over its body in the legends. All the houses and streets on this long street began to shake violently. Debris and dust continuously fell from the sky amidst the roar. The houses in this tea house were also creaking. The beams and pillars were swaying visibly, as if they were about to collapse at any moment. Shuang did not care about the danger around her. She rushed to the window and looked across the street. A huge and blazing flame was reflected in her beautiful and clear eyes. It was a huge pillar of fire that had risen out of thin air. It soared into the sky. Within the billowing black smoke, the raging flames were like a ferocious beast, as if it wanted to destroy everything around it. The center of the pillar of fire was the 3 Li Xiang Tavern. At the same time, a huge wave of air rushed out from the surroundings of the pillar of fire. The surrounding houses and pavilions immediately collapsed like they were made of paper. They were immediately engulfed by an even more intense flame. The tavern that had been peaceful and leisurely not long ago had completely disappeared in the blink of an eye. It had been completely erased from this world. Correspondingly, those who had disappeared along with it were of course the people who were still in the tavern at that time. There were even many innocent people around the 3 Li Xiang Tavern who had been affected by the explosion. This was an abnormally violent explosion. It was beyond everyone's expectations. No one could have predicted such a fierce and cruel counterattack, including the experienced people of Fuyunji on the streets. When the explosion was over, the huge pillar of fire was still burning. Black smoke billowed in the sea of fire, and the ears of all the people who were still alive were still buzzing. However, the earth finally calmed down and stopped shaking. The unstable walls of the buildings collapsed, and those that were strong enough managed to hold on after shaking for a long time. However, the people inside were still covered in dust and dirt from the falling dust. On the long street outside, there were only wails and screams. From here, there were a few people wrapped in flames who were rolling on the ground. There were even more people lying on the ground in the distance. The flames were burning their bodies, but they were already motionless. Shuang tightly gripped the railing in front of her. Her knuckles were as pale as her face. They were almost transparent. Thanks to the sturdiness of the tea house, the building did not collapse. Although it was only a street away, nothing major had happened here. Behind her, many people had fallen to the ground. They were currently slowly climbing up, as if they had not woken up yet. Shuang looked at the tragic scene on the long street and then at the tavern that had completely disappeared in the depths of the flames. A trace of extreme anger flashed through her eyes. Her body trembled slightly, as if she was about to fall into a state of madness. However, very quickly, she once again forcibly suppressed all her emotions. Her eyes became clear again. She decisively turned around and shouted, "Hurry, follow me. Let's save people first." Her words woke everyone up. Shuang then took the lead and jumped down the building. The others hurriedly followed. However, at this moment, the flames were soaring into the sky. Before they even got close, they could feel a wave of heat hitting them. Even though they were cultivators, they did not dare to get too close. Clearly, there was something strange about the flames caused by the explosion. They were much more powerful than ordinary flames. It was not realistic to put out the fire in a hurry. With Shuang in the lead, the group could only first rescue the injured at the edge of the fire. Those who had luckily escaped were dragged to a safe area far away. Those who were still burned by the flames were thrown to the ground. There were people who came over to put out the deadly flames with all their might. Screams and howls still reverberated, but as time passed, these sounds gradually became softer. Some people finally died in pain, while others quietly moaned at the side after escaping disaster. Occasionally, there would be a few who were too heavily injured and could not hold it in any longer. They would suddenly scream loudly, causing people to feel a soul-stirring feeling when they heard it. Half of Shui Ying's body was covered in dust. She stood on the long street. Some of her subordinates were busy saving people, while others were putting out the flames. However, everyone seemed to subconsciously stay away from her. Her figure looked abnormally lonely. Perhaps she had never been so fragile before. This fire was quickly put out. However, the reason for this was not because Fuyunji's people were efficient or fast. Instead, after the terrifying energy released by the flames seemed to have suddenly lost their support. At a certain moment, they suddenly withered. The towering pillars of fire dissipated, and the burning flames were extinguished. All that was left was a scene of desolation and chaos. The heat wave in the air had greatly lessened, but there was still a hot wind blowing past, as if it was recording the hellish horror from before. Shuang slowly walked into the depths of the fire. Along the way, there were broken trees, broken rocks, cracked ground, and a pile of charred, unrecognizable corpses. The scene was abnormally horrifying, causing one's scalp to go numb. However, this beautiful woman seemed to completely ignore it. Step by step, she walked forward, and finally arrived at the original location of the tavern. The Three Lixiang Tavern had already disappeared. A wave of heat blew past, sweeping up a corner of her clothes. Shuang stared blankly at the ground in front of her. Everything on this piece of land had disappeared into thin air. What was left was a huge pit that was almost 30 meters wide and had been burnt black by the flames. She stood next to this huge pit, looking so small. Lu Chen, Old Ma, White Lotus, and the black dog they brought with them had already entered the secret underground passage. Because they had made ample preparations before coming here this time, each person had a torch. Therefore, the darkness in the secret passage was quickly dispelled by the bright light of the fire, and it was as bright as day. Lu Chen walked in front, preparing to lead everyone, especially Atsu, to the wall of crushed rocks. Unexpectedly, before he could say anything, he saw a black shadow sweep past. Atsu ran in front of him again, and then jogged towards the wall of crushed rocks. The words that Lu Chen was about to shout out were forcibly swallowed back. He looked at Atsu strangely. However, this secret passage actually only had one direction, and there was nowhere else to go other than that. It was probably Atsu who found the direction himself. Lu Chen shook his head, a little puzzled, but still followed. White Lotus followed behind him, her expression becoming more and more complicated. However, under the faint worry, there seemed to be a hint of a smile that she could not help but smile. Not long after, they came to the side of the wall of crushed rocks. Lu Chen said to Atsu, "Look around here, see if there is any strange place." Before he finished speaking, he was suddenly startled. He looked at Atsu with some astonishment. It did not seem to have any intention of sniffing around. Instead, it directly put its feet on the wall of crushed rocks, then pointed at a smooth round stone, and turned back to Lu Chen and barked loudly. This. Lu Chen was a little frightened by this dog. He was stunned for a moment, and subconsciously said, "Damn, this stupid dog has become a spirit now?" Chapter 444. Atsu's behavior naturally attracted the attention of everyone in this secret passage. Old Ma and White Lotus both walked over and looked at the place where Atsu barked and pressed its feet. Lu Chen walked up and looked at it carefully. He felt that it was a little familiar. The stone in front of him was like a section of a stone pillar that had been cut off. It was not so conspicuous in a pile of rubble, but when he touched it with his palm, he could still feel the smoothness and fineness that was different from the surrounding areas. Lu Chen quickly remembered that when he came here for the first time, he had also noticed this place. However, after the last inspection, he did not find anything suspicious. At the same time, he did not find any clues in other places, so he left here. However, he did not expect that Atsu would also be interested in this round stone today. Judging from its appearance, it went straight to this stone as soon as it arrived. It did not even look at other places. Could it be that there was something special about this stone that made it so obvious that he could not see it? Lu Chen thought for a moment and could not help but turn to Old Ma and White Lotus and said, "Do you two see anything wrong with this stone?" Old Ma and White Lotus walked to his side. Old Ma looked at it carefully for a while and touched the stone with his hand. After a while, he shook his head and said with a trace of doubt, "I can't see it." Lu Chen looked at White Lotus again. White Lotus walked up calmly, patted, touched, and looked at it. Then she turned back and said to him, "This stone is not strange." Oh. Lu Chen was also speechless for a moment. He walked forward and began to touch the stone himself. In any case, there must be something strange about Atsu looking for this stone as soon as it arrived. Behind him, Atsu had already walked to the side and was lying on the ground. It raised its head and looked at White Lotus. White Lotus coughed and walked over to touch Atsu's head. She said to it very affectionately, "Atsu, are you hungry? I will find the best and most delicious demon beast meat for you later, okay?" Woof. Atsu barked and put his head back on the ground. Lu Chen touched the wall for a long time, but still could not find anything suspicious. It seemed that the round stone was just a stone that fell into this stone wall by accident. There was nothing too strange about it. He shook his head and was about to give up and let Atsu check out other places in this secret passage. Suddenly, the torches in their hands that had been burning quietly suddenly flickered in this quiet secret passage. Atsu, who had been lying lazily on the ground, suddenly pricked up its ears and raised its head. It seemed to have sensed something and was a little confused. After a moment, Atsu suddenly jumped up from the ground and barked at Lu Chen with a loud and ear-piercing voice. Woof 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 woof. Lu Chen and the others were startled and turned around to look. However, before they could react, all the earth and walls in this underground passage, including the wall of rubble, suddenly shook violently. At the same time, from a place that seemed to be very, very far away, an incomparably loud and muffled sound rang out. It was like the roar of a giant beast that had been hibernating deep underground for thousands of years. It penetrated directly into the ears and made one's heart jump. Immediately after, the entire ground began to tremble. It was as if a wave was surging out of the deep soil like a flood, rushing in all directions. The secret passage began to shake violently, and they could hardly stand still. Accompanied by the incessant barking of Atsu, large and small stones fell from above, as if the cave was about to collapse. Lu Chen shouted, "Go, it's going to collapse." Old Ma and White Lotus turned and ran, and Lu Chen and Atsu followed behind. At this time, as the secret passage shook more and more violently, a strange heat wave seemed to spread from the ground, and in the blink of an eye, the place was as hot as a steamer. Old Ma ran desperately towards the exit, cursing, "What the hell, is there an underground volcano?" Bai Lian snorted beside him, as if she was very disdainful of his words. In the blink of an eye, she saw that the exit of the secret passage had already appeared in front of them. Bai Lian exerted strength in her legs and suddenly flew out. Like a streak of white light, she flew to the exit in an instant and then turned around and jumped out. "You run so fast." Old Ma rolled his eyes. Among the three of them, his cultivation was obviously the weakest. Even his speed of running for his life seemed to be the slowest. But at this time, he could not care so much, and ran desperately with all his strength. However, things like talent and cultivation were really everywhere. In the blink of an eye, Lu Chen had also caught up. When he overtook Old Ma, he even had the time to look back and smile at him. Old Ma was furious, cursing as he ran, "It's so unfair. You talented people can even run faster than us. Do you want us mortals to live?" Lu Chen laughed, paused slightly, and stretched out his hand to support Old Ma's back. Old Ma only felt a force suddenly added to his body, and suddenly his pace doubled. In the blink of an eye, he rushed to the exit of the secret passage, and saw the light outside. Old Ma laughed, and said, "Good brother." Lu Chen pushed him out, and was about to go out and scold him, when suddenly he seemed to think of something. He stopped and looked back. Atsu had disappeared. In that split second, when everyone was running for their lives, Atsu, who originally ran out with him, suddenly disappeared. Lu Chen's face suddenly became gloomy. He was very clear about Atsu's current strength. Back in the Nanjiang and the Great Snow Mountain, in terms of escaping, perhaps the three people present today could not compare to this black dog. But why did it not follow them? Old Ma's voice came from outside, shouting, "Come out, Lu Chen." Lu Chen did not answer, but looked into the depths of the secret passage. He saw that in the depths of the passage, which was still shaking violently, there seemed to be a black shadow that looked like Atsu. It stopped in the secret passage, but turned around and looked at the place where the broken stone wall was. At this time, a strange red moonlight suddenly and strangely appeared in the depths of the darkness. Boom! There was a loud noise, as if something above had fallen. Listening to the movement, it seemed that the peach tree, which had always been in full bloom, had fallen in this unexpected earthquake. Old Ma's voice was filled with anxiety. Obviously, he, who was standing outside, did not know why Lu Chen was still in the secret passage, including the black dog. Old Ma raised his voice and shouted anxiously, "Come out, Lu Chen, the cave is about to collapse." Below the cave, the strange red moonlight was getting brighter and brighter. Gradually, a trace of outline emerged and reflected on the broken stone wall. The source of the moonlight was the strange round stone. Atsu stood in the violently shaking cave, looking a little hesitant. It looked back at Lu Chen, but the blood-red moon in front of it seemed to be an irresistible temptation. So after a moment of hesitation, Atsu turned back and walked into the depths of the cave again. The black figure was about to walk into the darkness, into the strange blood shadow. Lu Chen gritted his teeth, glanced at the blood moon expressionlessly, and then jumped up again without hesitation, rushing in the direction where Atsu ran. Even if the sky was falling and the earth was collapsing, he would catch this damn, stupid dog that had gone through life and death with him. Chapter 445. Shuang stood on the street that had just been burned by the flames, looking at the huge pit that had suddenly appeared in front of her, her face pale. On the ground beside her, there were still many unextinguished flames still burning. The inside of the pit was even more turbulent, even the air was a blur, and traces of scorched black could be seen everywhere. As for that tavern, it had completely disappeared from this world, including the people inside. But was it all of them? Shuang stared at the depths of the pit. In the scorched black soil that had been burned by the flames, there were cracks and crisscrossing cracks. There were many places where hard stones that were buried deep underground could be seen. It looked like the corners of a huge building. Shuang suddenly clenched her hands, shocked. The screams and shouts on the streets were still incessant, but the situation was much better than when the explosion had just occurred. Shuang attached great importance to the devil cult's strange movements this time, and had arranged a large number of Fuyunji's men on this long street. She had originally thought that if the devil cult's most mysterious ghost elder revealed any traces, Fuyunji would launch a large-scale attack, and capture this great demon who had been hiding and on the run for decades in one fell swoop. Of course, this idea had now become a pipe dream, but another unexpected benefit was that Fuyunji had many people here, and their efficiency in providing aid became extremely high. Such a violent and sudden explosion, and that incomparably ferocious and obviously strange flame, after the fiercest momentum had passed, the situation was quickly controlled. Many of the injured were quickly put out of the flames on their bodies, and pulled to a safe place. Many of the houses that had been on fire were intercepted, put out, and even directly pushed down. In a very short time, an isolation zone was quickly cleared around the area of the explosion, and thus prevented the possibility of the fire spreading. So even though the situation at the center of the explosion was terrible, the surrounding situation quickly calmed down. After a while, the man who had been next to Shuang in the tea house walked over, his expression solemn. He stood behind Shuang and said in a low voice, "Hall master." Shuang did not turn around, and only asked in a low voice, "How is the situation?" The man hesitated for a moment before saying, "Of the brothers outside the 3 Li Xiang Tavern, including those on the street and in the neighboring houses, 14 are dead, and nearly 30 are severely injured." At this point, he paused and seemed to subconsciously lick his lips with his tongue, as if he felt some bitterness in his mouth. He said in a low voice, "There were 11 people who entered the tavern, and now they are all gone." They were all gone. Shui Ying's pupils contracted slightly. Even though this sentence was a little tactful, the meaning behind it was very clear. 11 living people had entered the tavern and then exploded, disappearing. This was a true death without a complete corpse. Perhaps their bodies had been smashed into pieces. Shuang lowered her head slightly and looked at the ground under her feet. Not far away from her was the edge of the huge pit. Amidst the scorched black ground, she could still vaguely see the frightening blood-red color in the soil. Everything was mixed together. What about the people from the devil cult? Shuang took a deep breath and asked again. The man said, "From the beginning to the end, only Fan Tui entered the tavern. The others did not notice anything out of the ordinary, and we can't find him now. Perhaps he was also in the tavern just now." "Impossible." Shuang suddenly interrupted him. Her pale face was filled with extreme anger. She said in a cold voice, "Fan Tui is the leader of the Western Continent's devil cult. The devil cult will not abandon him so easily. This person must have escaped." The man was stunned for a moment, and then said in shock, "But we surrounded the area just now. Even a bird could not fly out." "That's impossible." Shuang was about to speak when she suddenly sensed something. She abruptly raised her head and looked toward the sky. The sky, which had been shrouded by billowing black smoke not long ago, became clear in the blink of an eye. A light breeze blew, but 4 clouds floated over and floated in the sky above this region. Sunlight shone down, but it seemed to be unable to shine into the depths of those clouds. Shui Ying's body suddenly trembled. The last bit of color on her face seemed to have disappeared, and she even instinctively held her breath. An aura that was as powerful as a tsunami slowly spread down from the sky. It did not hurt anyone, but it made one's heart beat faster and they felt reverence. Very quickly, many people in the surroundings also noticed the sudden abnormality in the sky. They all raised their heads to look. A moment later, a cloud suddenly floated down and landed on the ground. Not long after, the strong wind blew away the cloud, revealing an abnormally tall and sturdy body and a face that was not angry but dignified. The sunlight shone on his shiny bald head, reflecting a ray of light. Whoosh, smoke and dust billowed, and the commotion calmed down. True Lord Tianlan landed on the side of the large pit not far away from Shuang. Many of the Fuyunji experts in the distance, including those who were lightly injured, knelt down and paid their respects. True Lord Tianlan did not turn back. He merely waved his hand toward the people behind him. Thus, the crowd stood up once again, including the man beside Shuang. The entire street was silent at this moment. There was only the occasional sound of the firewood cracking when the remaining flames burned. Many people's gazes fell on the abnormally petite and fragile figure standing beside True Lord Tianlan's burly body. The silence in the air was so stifling that it was hard to breathe. Ever since he landed, True Lord Tianlan had been looking at the bottom of the large pit. He did not even glance at Shuang, who was standing beside him. Shui Ying's hands were clenched into fists. She closed her eyes and opened them again. Then, she slowly lowered her head and said softly, it's all my fault. Please punish me, true lord. True Lord Tianlan did not reply. He frowned slightly as he looked at the charred marks at the bottom of the large pit and the bluestone brick walls exposed in the soil. He seemed to be deep in thought. Suddenly, he raised his head and glanced at the sky. The 3 clouds in the sky were still there. The enormous and heavy pressure seemed to be everywhere. When the wind blew, he seemed to be able to see the mocking sneers and unfathomable gazes in the sky. After a while, the 3 clouds slowly rose and then disappeared without a trace. True Lord Tianlan was silent for a while. Then, he asked, "What are the casualties?" Shuang reported the number she had just learned with a slightly trembling voice. She did not dare to omit a single person. After hearing the heavy casualty figures, True Lord Tianlan's expression seemed to become even more unsightly. Under the suppression of his enormous aura, everyone held their breath as if they were afraid of the thunderous might of heaven. However, the expected rage did not appear. In the end, True Lord Tianlan only said in a slightly low voice, "There are 2 things I want you to do immediately. First, seal off the entire street, search every house carefully, don't leave any gaps, anyone who is related to the devil cult, capture them." Shuang lowered her head and said, "Yes." True Lord Tianlan pointed at the area at the bottom of the large pit. His eyes flickered. "Send people down immediately to dig up the soil and expose the bluestone and brick walls. If it's ruins, see if there are secret passages. Those demons might have escaped through here." At the end, his expression finally became somewhat unsightly. Chapter 446. Lu Chen, who was running in the dark, looked back. With the remaining light from the torch that had fallen to the ground, he could see a faint light coming through the hole. Amidst the rumbling sounds of falling rocks and the falling rocks and soil, he could hear the old horse's panicked and anxious voice outside. "Come out! Come out! Come out!" Boom! With a loud bang, the earth and rocks suddenly collapsed and covered the entrance. Old Ma's voice was also blocked outside, so no sound could be heard from inside. Lu Chen ran with all his might, dodging the falling dirt around him while his eyes burned with a deep black fire. After a while, he caught up with Black Dog Atu, who was running in front of him, and slapped it on the head. Atsu glanced at him and did not stop running. It grinned and stuck its tongue out. It seemed to be very happy. Lu Chen scolded, "Stupid dog, what are you doing?" Atu ran forward, growled in a low voice. A beam of red dim moonlight suddenly shone down from the front, passing through all the obstacles in this darkness, yet serene like a passageway leading to hell, shone on the ground in front of them. Lu Chen paused and his heart jumped. He looked up and saw that in the darkness, the gravel wall was also shaking violently. A blood-red moon slowly appeared on the wall in a distorted scene, emitting a strange dark red light. Atu let out a fierce roar and sped up his pace towards the blood moon. Lu Chen didn't even have time to warn him before he saw countless cracks suddenly appear on the stone wall after a loud boom. The stone wall creaked and the red moonlight trembled violently. Then, the once indestructible walls suddenly collapsed, and in the middle of the blood moon, a large pitch-black hole appeared. Even from afar, one could feel the sinister chill coming from within. Atsu's roar became louder and louder, as if it had an unusual yearning and desire for that direction. Almost without any hesitation, it rushed toward the black hole covered by the red light of the blood moon. Lu Chen, of course, saw that Atsu was very abnormal at the moment. He did not know what was in the black hole, but at this moment, there was no turning back. The tunnel was collapsing faster and faster, and it was about to be completely buried by the stones. Lu Chen could only curse in his heart. Then, he leapt forward and followed Atu into the cave before the dark rocks that were falling down like a surging tide completely submerged them. Just a moment later, there was a loud bang outside. Then all the light and sound were covered, and everything disappeared. The ground above the ground was also shaking violently. Old Ma and White Lotus could not stand steadily. They staggered and struggled to stabilize their bodies. After a while, the surroundings quieted down, but the courtyard in front of them looked like it had been changed beyond recognition. Some parts of the ground were bulging, and some parts had collapsed. The originally flat ground now looked like a towel that had been twisted into a ball, including the peach tree that had bloomed for many days at the entrance of the cave. At this time, the peach tree finally fell. Its petals fell into the black mud, and the peach tree was also broken in the middle, buried in the gravel and mud. In the mess, Old Ma rushed to the entrance of the secret tunnel. Looking at the tightly blocked mud below, his face was pale, and he wanted to cry but had no tears. His mouth was wide open, and for a long time, he could not say a word. At this time, White Lotus came over. Looking at the entrance of the secret tunnel, she was also stunned. After a moment, she turned to Old Ma and asked in astonishment, "Where is Lu Chen? Why didn't he run out?" Old Ma's face was blank, and it seemed that even his voice was not stable. With a trace of trembling and choking, he said bitterly, I don't know, but I clearly saw that he ran easily, and even had the strength to help me and push me out. He should have run out." White Lotus was also speechless. After a while, she seemed to think of something again. She suddenly looked around the courtyard, and then her eyes widened again, as if she could not believe it. "Where is Atsu? Didn't Atsu run out?" Old Ma said blankly, "It seems so. I didn't see it come out. Is it also buried underground?" White Lotus said angrily, "What the hell is wrong with these two? Don't they usually run away faster than anyone else? Why are they suddenly silent at this critical moment?" Then she comforted Old Ma, "Forget it, this is also a natural disaster. You don't have to be too sad. As the old saying goes, good people don't live long, and bad people don't die easily. Lu Chen and Atsu, I don't mean to criticize them, but they are really crazy and cunning. Maybe they won't die so easily." Old Ma stood in the same place and thought for a while with a bitter face. Suddenly, he jumped up and clapped his hands, as if he had made up his mind. "You are right. In any case, we have to find a way to save people first. In this way, you stay here and see if you can think of a way to save them first, or just dig some soil. I'll be back soon." Saying this, Old Ma strode to the gate. White Lotus shouted behind him in surprise, "Where are you going?" Old Ma said without looking back, "I'm going to find perfected Lord Tianlan and ask him to save Lu Chen." Bai Lian stood there and watched as the old horse disappeared. She turned around and stared blankly at the secret passage that had been buried by the mud and stones. Suddenly, she frowned and muttered to herself, "That's strange. If a normal person was buried like this, wouldn't they be dead a long time ago? Why does Old Ma seem to take it for granted that Lu Chen is still alive, and even wants to find Martial Uncle Tianlan to save him? This person is really weird." His inexplicable strange ability seems to be very similar to those shady shadows in Fuyunji. White Lotus blinked, and there was a glimmer in her eyes. Although they had suffered heavy losses and suffered heavy casualties, Fuyunji was a powerful hull. The experience of being bathed in the sea of life and death for many years was quickly revealed at this moment. Extinguishing the fire, saving people, sealing off and searching. Everything was carried out in an orderly and efficient manner. At the same time, a large number of people were summoned here from other places in the Immortal City. At the center of the explosion, a large number of people from Fuyunji jumped into the big pit and began to dig vigorously under the hot pit. True monarch Tianlan and Shuang did not leave. They had been standing at the edge of the crater, quietly looking down. They watched as more and more of the green bricks and rocks were revealed, as well as the strange patterns that were faintly discernible by others. It seemed to be a part of a deep underground palace. It was at this moment that an exclamation suddenly came from the bottom of the big pit. A moment later, someone shouted loudly, "Dug it, dug it. It's dug it, it's dug it." Someone dug a big hole in this piece of green bricks. Chapter 447. The seal of the underground relic has been broken? In the Star Hall of Sky Dragon Mountain, Perfected Lord Tian Lan, who came uninvited, asked Perfected Lord Guyu. Looking at him sitting on the ground casually, he seemed to be very familiar with this place because he had come here a few times recently. Perfected Lord Guyu didn't mind. After chasing away his subordinates and servants, there were only the two of them left here. Even he himself was lying down casually. Yes, he directly laid down on the ground and looked at the strange starry sky map on the dome of the hall. Probably not yet. Otherwise, the immortal city wouldn't be so peaceful. Perfected Lord Guyu gave this answer after thinking for a while. He then sat up and waved his hand. A 1-meter-long map appeared in his hand. With a swoosh, it unfolded on the ground between the two of them, revealing all kinds of complicated patterns. This netherworld master diagram was left behind by our Star Hall's ancestor. Look here, here, and here. True Monarch Guyu's finger pointed at the scroll a few times, her expression calm as she said, "These important places are the places where the ancestors in the past laid down a powerful seal, firmly suppressing the ethereal palace. There can be no mistakes." And outside the netherworld, there are 3 levels of underground palace with many restrictions and mechanisms. If ordinary people don't have this map, it would be extremely difficult to find the way. Perfected Lord Tian Lan nodded. His eyes flickered as he looked at the mysterious map in front of him. After a while, he said, "It is indeed a supernatural power." Amazing. True Monarch Guyu said, "When the ethereal palace was sealed back then, it was my family's grandmaster who was in charge of this matter. However, your esteemed master, old ancestor Tian Hong, has an extremely long lifespan and exceptional talent. Could it be that he didn't leave any words for you?" Perfected Lord Tian Lan's eyes drooped. "My master never mentioned this when he was alive." Perfected Lord Guyu nodded. "None of the descendants and disciples of the other seniors know about this. They must have made an agreement back then." As he said that, he looked at the scroll again, and then his finger slowly swept across the map until it reached an inconspicuous area at the edge of the map. He raised his head and said to True Lord Tian Lan, "The cave dug by the demons of the devil cult is roughly in this position. It's still far from the nether world, so there's no need to hurry. It's just that I didn't expect them to be able to break through the outermost restriction. It's going to be difficult to deal with later on." Perfected Lord Tian Lan asked, "What do you mean?" Guyu True Monarch's finger slowly moved around the outside of the scroll, saying, "The underground labyrinth is crisscrossed, and with the ancient traps and restrictions, it is extremely dangerous. But if all of these things are dealt with, then these paths are connected in all directions. So long as someone is willing to make use of it, then perhaps they would be able to connect to all parts of the city underground without anyone noticing." Perfected Lord Tian Lan fell silent. After a while, he said, "I understand. I'll handle this matter." As he said that, he stood up, as if he was about to leave, but he stopped and said to Perfected Lord Guyu, "Is the appearance of the blood moon a sign of instability in the netherworld?" Perfected Lord Guyu frowned, and after a moment of hesitation, he said, "You can't say it completely. When the blood moon appears, it will also be when the netherworld's power is at its highest in 1,000 years. At that time, many demons and monsters will be restless, but as long as the seal is fine, it should be able to endure." As he said that, he paused for a moment, then said, "It's just that we still don't know when the blood moon will appear. It's said that when the blood moon is about to appear, there will be strange signs in the world. But I've been observing the astronomical phenomena these days, but I haven't seen any ominous signs. It's really strange." As he said that, Perfected Lord Guyu's face became a little gloomy, and he muttered to himself, "Could it be that there's something wrong with the omen on the yin-yang diagram?" Perfected Lord Tian Lan raised his head to look at the star chart on the dome of the hall, his expression calm. He didn't reply, and only said, "According to what you're saying, it'll be fine as long as we don't let these demons and clowns enter deep into the netherworld?" Perfected Lord Guyu nodded, and said, "Yes. But these people have actually stretched their claws into the underground ruins." He sneered, and said, "Evil sect demons, their intentions are deserving of death. Perfected Lord Tianlan said indifferently, "Don't worry, leave the rest to me." These words were said calmly, as if he wasn't at all affected by the huge explosion that had happened before their eyes. Perfected Lord Tianlan himself didn't seem to feel that it was like a slap to his face. Seeing his expression, true monarch Guyu laughed. With their current status, as well as their current relationship, they naturally spoke much more freely. True monarch Guyu smiled and asked him, "That's right, do you have any thoughts about Shuang? Have you thought about how to deal with her?" Right now, the entire Sky Dragon Mountain, no, probably the entire Immortal City, is guessing how you will deal with her. Perfected Lord Tianlan glanced at him, and said, "Those old fellows as well?" "All of them." Perfected Lord Guyu smiled, and said, "They're all watching you." Perfected Lord Tianlan snorted, flicked his sleeves, and turned to walk away, and said at the same time, "These fellows want to watch a show, I won't let them. Let's wait for a while first." When he passed through the red moon's shadow, Lu Chen was in a trance for a moment. It was like an illusion. He only felt that in that instant, a boundless land had suddenly appeared in front of him, and a blood-like light had enveloped the sky and the ground. Everything was barren, and there wasn't a single living thing to be seen. No people, no animals, not even a tree or a blade of grass. It was filled with a deathly stillness. In the next instant, the ground suddenly cracked, and hundreds of huge blood-colored light pillars shot up from the ground. The surging magma turned into fire dragons, and rushed into the sky, wreaking havoc and roaring, and the world was filled with killing intent. Then, there was a wave of shrill ghost cries, and countless malicious ghosts, skeletons, and undead creatures rushed out from the huge cracks in the ground, occupying the entire world, and spread out like a flood. It was also at this suffocating moment that Lu Chen suddenly heard a resounding dragon roar from high up in the sky. A shadow covered the sky, and even the blood-colored light seemed to dim slightly. Lu Chen struggled to look up, and saw that high up in the sky, an incomparably huge black dragon had suddenly appeared, riding on clouds and flying over, and it looked down angrily, looking down at the world with disdain. A moment later, dragon flames spewed out from the dragon's mouth, sweeping across the world, and instantly engulfing countless undead creatures underground. However, the undead below seemed to be endless, and they were getting stronger and stronger. Not long after, skeletons and giant undead creatures that were as huge as mountains appeared, and they fought fiercely with the unbelievably powerful black dragon in the sky. This battle seemed to be endless, and it continued just like that, until the illusion disappeared. That moment seemed to only be a moment, but it seemed to make Lu Chen feel as if he had seen 100 years of time. Then, there was silence all around, and it was originally dark before his eyes, but after a moment, 2 dark green lights lit up beside him. Chapter 448. Just as Lu Chen's heart was lifted, the dark flame in his eyes suddenly became gentle again. The 2 rays of light in the darkness were none other than Atu. Lu Chen walked to his side and wrapped his arms around Atu's neck. He gave him a hug and scratched the fur on Atu's head. He said, "All right, now let's see what's in here. Are you the one who didn't fear being crushed to death?" Atsu rubbed its head against Lu Chen's chest. Lu Chen stood up and looked around. Probably after a period of time, he had almost adapted to the environment here. The scene in front of him was no longer pitch black like when they first came in, but the surroundings were still relatively dim. Vaguely, they could feel that they were in a spacious tunnel, which was similar to the one outside the gravel wall. Maybe it was the same tunnel outside, but they didn't know why it was separated from them by the gravel wall. As for the gravel wall, it should have collapsed in the explosion just now, and a big hole appeared, allowing them to crawl in. But behind them, the original tunnel was also collapsed, completely blocking their way out. After a while, suddenly, a red light shone in from the front of the tunnel. The light was as red as blood, and the figures of Lu Chen and Atsu were reflected in the light. At the same time, with the help of the flashing red light, Lu Chen and Atsu could vaguely see an exit in front of them, and that was where the red light shone. Lu Chen raised his hand and patted Atsu, and said softly, "Let's go and have a look." As he spoke, he strode forward. But after a few steps, he suddenly stopped and looked back at Atsu. He looked up and down at it for a while. Atsu was a little confused. It barked and looked at Lu Chen. Lu Chen shook his head and used his hand to measure the height of Atsu. Then he said, "San Xian, you seem to be fatter than before." The passageway was not very long, and it was precisely because of this that the beam of red light from outside was able to penetrate it. After walking for a while, they passed through the passageway, and a circular arched door appeared in front of them. With the help of the red light, they could see that there were pictures of dragons, tigers, and fierce beasts carved on it. The carvings were exquisite and lifelike. After walking through the arched door, the space before them suddenly opened up. An unimaginably huge space appeared in front of them. The cave that Lu Chen and Atsu were in was dug out from a mountain wall. A stone staircase that was over 1,000 feet long extended downwards and finally landed in a city. That's right, beneath the feet of Lu Chen and Atsu, beneath the gigantic underground cavern, there was an almost complete city. Looking down from this cave entrance, the streets of this hidden underground city were crisscrossed in picturesque disorder. It could be seen that this city had been planned by an expert when it was built. It looked solemn and dignified, extremely imposing. On both sides of the streets in the city, there were also various kinds of houses and pavilions built. The style of these houses was somewhat different from the houses that humans lived in today's world. They seemed to be generally larger. At the same time, the scale of this city was extremely large. The streets and houses stretched forward. Looking down from such a high place, Lu Chen actually could not see the end of the city at first glance. It was just that although the scene in front of him was spectacular, it also had a somewhat strange atmosphere. Firstly, as far as Lu Chen could see, everything in this city below was silent. All the streets and houses were empty. Not to mention people, not even wild cats, dogs, or even living creatures like rats could be seen. Secondly, Lu Chen raised his head and looked up. At this moment, the place where he was standing was close to the dome above the originally dark underground cavern. In his sight, a red moon was suspended in the sky above the city. Countless red lights with streaks of flickering cloud-like afterimages surrounded the blood moon that was as red as blood. At the same time, the blood-red light sprinkled in all directions, covering the entire underground cavern and the entire huge underground city in the blood-red light. Lu Chen remembered the strange dark red light that he saw in the dark tunnel before. It seemed like the source was here. A blood moon was suspended in a huge empty city. This scene was extremely strange, and people could not help but feel a chill in their hearts. However, Lu Chen and Atsu did not seem to be too frightened. It was probably because they had experienced too many things in the past. Since there was no way back, they could only continue to move forward. Lu Chen patted Atsu's head and walked down. When he walked out of the cave, more red light fell from the sky and sprinkled on his body. It made him look red all over, including his face and eyes. It was a little funny, but also a little scary, because he looked a little like a blood man. When Atsu arrived here, he seemed to have quietened down. He was no longer as lively as before. He walked down beside Lu Chen, and at the same time, he stretched out his nose and sniffed the ground from time to time, as if he was looking for something. However, he seemed to have no clue and found nothing. It was only when he stepped into the city that Lu Chen realized that the feeling he'd had when he looked down from the cave entrance was a little off. The houses in this city were bigger than he had imagined. Compared to the human houses in the immortal city above his head, the houses here were at least twice as big. Looking at those tall and even majestic houses, Lu Chen, who was walking on the abnormally spacious street, felt very small. If there were really people living here in the distant past, then the race that lived here at that time should be at least 2 to 3 times bigger than the human race today. Even the barbarians in the southern wilderness did not have such an exaggerated physical body. Moreover, looking at the huge scale of this city, the original population here must be extremely large. In this dead silence, Lu Chen faintly felt a trace of uneasiness and horror. He naturally thought of the legend about the huge ruins under the immortal city that had been spread in the world for many years. Now it seemed that it was very likely to be related to this city, but where did the people here go? Lu Chen walked on the street for a while and suddenly frowned. After a slight hesitation, he still turned into a tall house on the street. The layout of the houses here was also different from the houses of the human race in the immortal city, and many of the furniture-like things looked like they were made of stone, so after so many years, they still looked undamaged, just covered in dust. But there was no one. Lu Chen walked out with his brows tightly furrowed, and the doubts in his heart grew bigger and bigger. As he continued to walk forward, his gaze swept across his surroundings. Suddenly, he raised his head and revealed a shocked expression. He raised his head and looked forward as if he had seen something inconceivable. In front of him, on the street in the center of the city, there was a huge, statue-like thing standing there. However, Lu Chen could not see what the statue was at all, because it looked like it only had half a round body, and it was even the lower half. At the same time, this huge statue pierced the dome of the cave, and was actually connected to the soil layer above. Lu Chen retracted his gaze, took a few steps forward, and suddenly stopped. He looked back with some shock, and looked at the nondescript and somewhat strange huge statue. Then, he thought that the position seemed to be similar to the position of the white tiger statue on the ground. Chapter 449. Some things probably couldn't stand up to careful consideration or association. Regardless of whether the truth was really as Lu Chen thought, once he thought of the huge and strangely shaped statue in front of him and the white tiger statue he saw on the ground of the immortal city, he immediately felt that everything seemed to be similar. Originally, the white tiger statue in the immortal city was tall, mighty, and imposing. It was already extremely shocking, and when Lu Chen saw it that day, he couldn't help but exclaim in admiration in his heart. At the same time, he felt nostalgic like many people. He really didn't know what kind of powerful ancient race was able to build such a magnificent statue. Now that he recalled, Lu Chen remembered more details. Although his first impression at that time was that the white tiger statue was majestic and shocking, in fact, the lower half of the statue was not standing. Lu Chen carefully recalled and confirmed that he really didn't see the feet of the white tiger statue. At that time, most people thought that the white tiger was probably a crouching tiger, a ferocious tiger statue lying on the ground with unparalleled majesty. Even if they didn't see the four legs directly, it was probably the technique used when the statue was carved, so they didn't pay too much attention. However, at this moment, standing in the underground city and looking at the scene in front of him, Lu Chen realized that perhaps many people in the immortal city were wrong. Deep underground, there was the other half of the white tiger statue here. The white tiger statue seemed to have passed through two worlds, stepping on both sides of the river. It was unfathomable and unimaginable. Lu Chen looked at the white tiger statue for a long time. Then, he suddenly turned around and looked at the surrounding streets. The statues each occupied half, then what about the city in front of him? Did these countless tall and silent houses have anything to do with the immortal city on the surface? Huff, huff. Just as Lu Chen was staring at the eerily silent streets and houses in a daze, he suddenly heard a strange sound coming from the side. He turned around to take a look and was stunned for a moment. It was unknown when Atu had been strolling along the side, sniffing and sniffing along the way. He walked to the side of the huge statue in the center of the city. He raised his head and looked up, as if he was very surprised by such a huge statue, and also a little shocked. Then, Atsu rubbed its body on the half-statue and smelled it. Finally, it found a corner and lifted one of its legs to pee for a while. Lu Chen was speechless for a moment. Seeing that Atsu seemed to be refreshed after peeing, he wanted to say something but stopped. He looked up at the towering statue and was a little worried that he and Atsu would suddenly be crushed to death. Fortunately, it seemed that this statue was temporarily not efficacious, or the unusually lifelike and breathtaking parts were on the ground of the immortal city, making people feel more comfortable. Don't do this in the future. Lu Chen touched Atsu's head and said, no matter what, you still have to respect such a huge statue. It was unknown whether Atsu understood or not. It just raised its head and looked at him. After a moment, it suddenly turned its head to look at the other side of the city and let out a low roar. There was hostility and vigilance in that roar, as if it had discovered something. Lu Chen raised his eyebrows and looked in the direction that Atsu was looking at. Then, he discovered that in this huge cave that was shrouded in blood-red light, other than the cave on the mountain wall that he had just come down from, there were 7 or 8 similar caves on the mountain wall. There was also a stone staircase that connected to this underground city. And in the direction that Atsu was looking at, a figure suddenly flashed and walked out of a cave on the mountain wall. Lu Chen's expression changed slightly, and he reacted almost immediately. He stretched out his hand and pulled Atsu. His body bent down and rolled from the middle of the road to the bottom of a house on the side of the street. He used the high wall to hide his body. After a moment, Atsu also ran over quietly. At this time, in this place, who would suddenly appear? Lu Chen was not a god. Of course, he did not know what was happening outside at this moment. However, years of being a shadow had long made him develop the habit of putting self-preservation first. After making sure that he and Atsu were hiding, he slowly poked his head out and looked in that direction from afar. On the mountain wall in the distance, 2 figures appeared one after another. They stood at the top of the cave entrance and looked down at the city below. They seemed to be talking to each other, and then they walked down together. Lu Chen glanced around again. Looking at the empty street, there was a little doubt in his eyes. After that, he continued to observe the situation over there. But after a while, he suddenly frowned because he found that the 2 people seemed to be walking in his direction all the way. Have I been discovered? Or is there another reason? Lu Chen pondered for a moment, but he looked back at the tall and strange statue. At this moment, he and Atsu were almost under this tall statue, and this place was vaguely the center of this city in the catacombs. Almost all the streets led here. He hesitated for a moment, gently touched Atsu who was lying obediently beside him, and then pointed to the house next to them. After that, he gently got up, bent down, and quietly walked into the door. This house looked tall and complete, with a building and a courtyard. After entering, Lu Chen even found that there was a well in the middle of the courtyard. He walked over and took a look, and then found that there was no trace of water at the bottom. It had become a dry well. He looked around. Being in this house that was much taller than ordinary people, there was indeed a sense of oppression and insignificance. Perhaps the original people who lived here were unusually tall. But now was not the time to think about these things. He called Atsu over, hid behind the door, and then looked out through the very small gap in the door. After an unknown amount of time, a series of footsteps came from afar, getting closer and closer. Atsu was lying on the ground behind Lu Chen, faintly shaking its tail uneasily. Lu Chen turned his head and smiled at it. He reached out and patted Atsu's head, as if to comfort it, and then put his finger on his lips to make a silent gesture. Atsu obediently lowered its head and did not move. Lu Chen looked out again through the small gap in the door. Not long after, 2 figures finally appeared in his sight. It seemed like they didn't live in this city, because they were ordinary humans like Lu Chen. They were men of similar height and stature. And one of them, Lu Chen even felt that it was a little familiar. After a moment, Lu Chen recognized that person. Because he had seen him a few days ago, it was the chef from the 3 Li Xiang Tavern. Lu Chen was slightly shocked. At this moment, the chef seemed to have changed into a different person. He had a calm temperament, and his eyes were sharp. He was obviously a capable and powerful character. To be able to suddenly appear from the tavern in this strange underground city, needless to say, this chef was obviously strange. Lu Chen laughed coldly in his heart, and then shifted his gaze to the man standing beside the chef. At this moment, he heard the footsteps outside suddenly stop, and the man that he did not know stopped under the statue. He looked a little unhappy and asked, "You brought me so far underground, where is Elder Gui?" Chapter 450. Elder Gui. Lu Qin, who was hiding behind the door, did not move at all. Even his breathing did not become erratic or hurried. Only his pupils suddenly constricted. When he looked at the two people outside through the gap of the door, there was a deep and unfathomable glow in his eyes. On the street outside the house, under the huge statue, the mysterious chef who was questioned just now seemed to be very polite to the person who asked the question. He said, "Hall Master Fan, you've just arrived here, so you shouldn't be familiar with the rules here. In the Immortal City, it's really difficult for our god's sect to move forward, so we have to be careful. As for Elder Gui, look, am I not prepared to bring you to meet him?" The man who was addressed as Hall Master Fan was naturally Fan Tue, the leader of the Western Continent Demon Church who had just arrived in the Immortal City. After hearing the chef's words, he shook his head and said, "Looking at your attitude, even if I follow you there, I will not be able to meet Elder Gui immediately. Perhaps there will be a few more checkpoints to verify my identity, purpose, and so on." "Is that so?" The chef did not deny it. He only hesitated for a moment before saying apologetically, "Hall Master Fan, you are wise. Although my mission is to bring you there, and there will naturally be people to receive you later, I also do not know how to proceed after that. In my opinion, I will most likely have to trouble Hall Master Fan again. I hope you can understand." He said these words very politely and very sincerely. His attitude was really indescribable. Fan Tue was unhappy. After all, he was a powerful figure in the Western Continent. Now that he had risked his life to enter the Immortal City, he was treated like a thief and guarded against. How could he feel good? However, facing this humble and gentle chef, he couldn't lose his temper. He could only sigh and say, "Could it be that the Floating Clouds Agency is really so scary?" The chef nodded and said, "Yes. Fuyunji has been fighting with our god's sect for decades. Their methods are vicious and vicious. It can even be said that they are unscrupulous. Everyone in the world scolds our divine sect for being evil and harming people, and sees us as enemies. But in fact, in these decades of battles, the actions of those people in Fuyunji are even worse than our divine sect." Fan Tue snorted. Clearly, he had no objections to Chef's words. He nodded and said, "It's all that Baldi Tianlan's doing." Perfected Lord Tianlan's prestige was illustrious and his name had shaken the world for decades. The most eye-catching characteristic of him was his unswerving determination to fight the evil cult to the death. To the devil cult, that damn Baldi from Tianlang Mountain was indeed a great enemy of life and death, a blood feud as deep as the sea. The gnashing of teeth was also innumerable. Chef smiled bitterly, a trace of helplessness flashed across his eyes. There was a bit of heartache and desolation of being helpless towards that person even though they hated him to the core. Then, he said, "The Immortal City is the center of the world's cultivation world. If one wants to achieve something, the Immortal City is a place that all militarists must fight for. However, in this world now, Zhengxianmeng is the only one with great influence, occupying places like the Immortal City and Tianlang Mountain, which have dragon veins of fate. Until now, they have been operating here for hundreds of years. Not to mention other things, just in this Immortal City alone, there are countless spies of Zhengxianmeng and Fuyunji. There are many experts, and there are also the 6 old thieves from the top of Tianlang Mountain. If we really want to fight them head-on, our divine sect is really much weaker now." Fan Tue was slightly surprised and took a few more glances at the chef in front of him. He said, "You actually have such a clear understanding of the current situation. It seems like our divine sect also has many hidden talents in the Immortal City." Chef smiled and said, "Hall Master Fan, you're too kind. I'm just a nobody under Elder Ghost, not worth mentioning. At most, I've just stayed in the Immortal City for a long time and saw a little more things, so naturally I know a little more, that's all. However, to be honest, now that the enemy is strong, and Fuyunji and Tianlan see Elder Ghost as a thorn in their side, they must get rid of him as soon as possible. However, if Elder Ghost is slightly careless and reveals a little of his whereabouts, he will definitely attract a large number of experts to surround and kill him. We really cannot be careless. After all, now that the divine sect is weak, the great responsibility of prosperity rests on Elder Ghost's shoulders. Fan Tui was silent for a long time. Then, he let out a long sigh, flicked his sleeves, and said sadly, "The divine sect has fallen to such a state, what more can I say? I don't have to be calculative about these small matters. Bring me there. I hope that I can meet Elder Ghost as soon as possible and discuss the important matter that can revive the divine sect and restore the glory of our ancestors." Chef replied solemnly, "Yes, thank you for your understanding, Hall Master Fan. Please follow me, this way." As he spoke, he led Fan Tui forward, went around the huge statue, and walked towards the street in front. Looking at the direction they were walking in, it seemed like they wanted to pass through this empty underground city and walk to the other end, to a place that also had a staircase cave. Only when the two of them were far away did Lu Chen slowly stand up and walk out from behind the door. He first looked around, and after confirming that there was no one around, he looked at the two demons from the devil's sect who were gradually walking further away. He frowned and fell into deep thought. Elder Ghost? The important matter that could revive the divine sect? As a shadow who had been hiding in the devil's sect for 10 years, Lu Chen almost immediately caught the two most important points in the long pile of words that the two of them had said just now. As for the other words about how Fuyunji was even more vicious than the devil's sect, he just ignored them and pretended that he did not hear them. Were these words true? There was a slight possibility. Perhaps from the point of view of the two demons from the devil's sect, it was most likely true. However, Lu Chen did not care about these at all. It was not like he had not seen some of the vicious methods in the past. After thinking for a while, his face gradually turned solemn. He had never seen Elder Ghost before. It had been like this since 10 years ago when he was in the devil's sect. That person was the most mysterious person among all the elders in the devil's sect. Even in the early days, the people in Fuyunji had doubted whether this Elder Ghost really existed or if it was just a fabricated excuse by the devil's sect to boast about their own strength. But in the recent 10 years, the existence of Elder Ghost was already an unquestionable fact. If there was not this remaining Elder Ghost to preside over the overall situation, the devil's sect would have long been torn apart and drowned in the dust of the past by Fuyunji. This person was just like what the cook said, Fuyunji must get rid of him as soon as possible. Elder Ghost must die. No choice but to die. Other than that, there was still that important matter. The last important matter that could revive the divine sect and even restore the glory of the ancestors of the divine sect was the god-vanquishing incantation in the Battle of the Barren Valley 10 years ago. In that grand ceremony, there was once a person who witnessed the entire process and then personally sent everyone in the Barren Valley to hell. After so many years, that earth-shattering scene still lingered in Lu Chen's mind. That was the real power of heaven and earth. That was the power that could really change everything in the world. The devil's sect had real ability, they were not just talking. Looking at the back of the two people in the distance, Lu Chen hesitated for a moment. After a while, he still greeted Atsu and then quietly followed up. Even though there was danger ahead, but he still had to face it, for this imperfect human world. Chapter 451. The long street was very long and there was still a long way to go to the mountain wall at the far end. Lu Chen brought Atsu and followed behind the two evil faction sorcerers, cautiously following along the way to ensure that they would not be discovered by the two. The round blood moon on the dome was still faintly discernible floating in the sky, the red light spilled down, covering every corner of this underground city. It looked like a bloody city. And the figures traversing through the blood light also looked like they were walking in a sea of blood. After following them for a while, Lu Chen suddenly felt a little strange in his heart. The two people in front of him were still walking at a steady pace, even though the road ahead seemed to be quite far away. Generally speaking, at this distance, if there was no reason, like chatting and the like, the cultivators with cultivation skills would usually use their powers and speed up and quickly fly over. But right now Lu Chen looked from afar, the two people's walking speed was very slow and they did not seem to be talking to each other, they were just walking slowly. Why was that? Could it be that they just like to walk slowly? This answer was somewhat unacceptable, especially in this underground labyrinth city. The two evil faction demons obviously had urgent matters to attend to. They still had to meet the legendary mysterious ghost elder. No matter what, there seemed to be no reason to procrastinate like this. Lu Chen pondered for a moment, turned his head and looked around. Other than those tall houses and empty streets, there was only that ubiquitous blood-red light. Other than that, there was nothing unusual. Could it be that there is a problem with the red light here? Lu Chen almost thought of this at the first moment. After a moment of hesitation, he called Atsu and flashed into an empty house at the side. With the surrounding high walls as cover, naturally he was not afraid of being discovered by the two evil faction sorcerers. Lu Chen straightened his body. After thinking for a moment, he tried to stretch out his hand, 5 fingers clenched. At the same time, a little black flame appeared in his eyes. The surroundings were quiet. The situation where the blood-red light might obstruct his powers did not occur, which made him heave a sigh of relief. After all, right now he was in a dangerous place. If his powers were to be obstructed, then he would really be dead. However, before he had the time to put away his cultivation method, the small cluster of dark flames that was slowly lighting up in his palms suddenly made a whoosh sound. As if it was facing the wind, it suddenly expanded outwards, directly becoming more than 10 times bigger, turning into a ball of dark fire that was almost as big as a person's head, burning fiercely on his palm. Atsu was shocked, abruptly retreated 2 steps to the side. And Lu Chen was also taken aback. His face revealed a stunned expression. When he was experimenting with the spell just now, he didn't use any more magic power. Everything was the same as usual. However, the black fire that suddenly grew in size before him seemed to have increased his magic power tenfold in one night. His cultivation and magic power had already increased by 10 times in one night. Of course, Lu Chen did not believe this at all. He knew his own situation best. Although he often did not slack off in his daily cultivation, this strange power that originated from the curse of the black fire, through cultivation, did not increase very quickly. He even made a comparison. When he killed some powerful cultivators and life forms, the method of absorbing the aura of dead spirits gave the black fire a boost. Instead, it was faster than the speed of his daily cultivation. This was an extremely evil and strange technique. Lu Chen could not be clearer about the power of the black flames in his body. At the same time, he could also clearly determine that the black flames in his body were definitely not as powerful as they were now. So why did it suddenly increase by 10 times overnight? Lu Chen slowly loosened his palm, the black fire in his eyes slowly disappeared, and then the large ball of black fire that was burning in his hand also gradually extinguished, disappearing in midair. The surroundings were very quiet. There was not the slightest sound. As far as the eye could see, except for the blood-red light, there was still nothing out of the ordinary. Lu Chen frowned, looked up at the sky, as if he had encountered a great problem in his heart. After thinking for a while, he suddenly stretched out his right palm, and then stared at the center of his palm, began to circulate his power. In the depths of his chi sea, the withered and broken 5 elements disc slowly trembled. After a while, as if it was driven by some kind of power, it gradually turned over, revealing its dark side. In a moment, black fire suddenly appeared in both of Lu Chen's eyes. Almost at the same time, his right palm suddenly trembled, and a huge ball of fire spewed out from his palm with a muffled bang, several times larger than before, almost half the size of a person. In front of Lu Chen, the countless blood-red light around him, madly burning. There was no heat, no luster. The dark light was like a horrifying distorted abyss, ready to swallow everything around it, burning here. Lu Chen's expression changed slightly. Suddenly his body flashed. The next moment, he was already beside the main entrance. Looking at the stone statue erected there, he directly pressed his hand on it. The black fire seemed to dim for a moment, along with the rotation of his palm, disappeared from sight, but the next moment, the black fire suddenly appeared on the other side of the stone statue. At the same time, from many hard parts of the stone statue, at the same time, traces of black fire appeared. As if in that instant, the black fire had already entangled the stone statue, seeped into the stone statue, and then did not extinguish, still burning. After a moment, a low muffled sound came out from the stone statue. Under Lu Chen's gaze, and Atsu's astonished gaze, that stone statue suddenly turned from a complete piece of stone into numerous tiny sand particles, and just like that, it suddenly collapsed, turned into ashes in the dark fire, scattered in this empty street. In a blink, that stone statue had already disappeared from this world. And the black fire was still there, still burning in Lu Chen's palm, like a hungry beast, greedily scanning the surroundings, searching for a bloody prey. Lu Chen sighed, retracted his arm, the black fire slowly retracted, in between, the black fire twisted, as if it was still unwilling. Lu Chen raised his head, looked at the blood moon in the sky again. After a long while, he suddenly spoke, "Atsu, this blood moon is strange. It seems to have something to do with the black fire in our bodies. It did not hinder our skills, on the contrary, the black fire's power seems to have increased by more than 10 times in this place." Atsu quietly snorted. No one could tell what he was feeling. Lu Chen instead looked at the blood moon with a complicated expression. After a while said, "Hope, the evil sect finding this place, is not because of this blood moon. Let's go, Atsu, this time no matter what, we must see clearly what the evil sect is doing." Chapter 452. Stepping out of the door, Lu Chen looked forward and found that he had been tossing and turning in the house for a while, but the two people outside had not disappeared from his sight. They were still walking slowly in the distance, just that they had walked quite a distance away from when he first saw them. Obviously, during the time when he was not out, the two evil cult demons still did not use any supernatural power to increase their walking speed. They were just like two ordinary people, walking slowly in this underground city and the sky full of blood-red light. Lu Chen was really puzzled about this. He had tried it just now. This blood moon light did not have any harmful effects on his spiritual power, and even instantly increased the power of the black fire in his body by 10 times. And although the surrounding streets and houses were empty and did not look like it was inhabited by people, it was a little strange. But in fact, after being here for so long, he did not discover any danger, nor did he discover any abnormalities. So why didn't the two of them cast a spell and leave quickly? The evil cult demons had always been cautious. No matter how he looked at it, they should not be walking like this. Lu Chen shook his head, suppressed the doubts in his heart, and led Atsu to follow them again. In the middle of this, with a slight thought, he lightly tapped the ground with his foot and used a bit of his magic power. Immediately, he felt a strong force pushing his body forward. In an instant, he flew forward, and he was much faster than he usually was. That sound was probably because he used too much strength, so when his feet left the ground, it made a muffled sound. Lu Chen was startled, quickly controlled his body in the air, lightly landed to the side, rolled, and hid in a house at the side. At the same time, Atsu also quietly ran over. Lu Chen poked his head out to look ahead, and found that the two evil cult demons did not look back. It should be because they were too far away that they did not notice the strangeness behind them. Lu Chen heaved a sigh of relief, thinking that this place was really strange. Just as he was about to get up and chase after it again, he saw that although Atsu had been following him obediently, when it had free time, it would look up at the dome from time to time, carefully observing the mysterious and strange blood moon in the sky. Lu Chen pondered for a moment before he walked over and touched Atsu's head. "Atsu, what exactly are you looking for when you brought me here?" Atsu tilted his head. His eyes seemed to be a little dazed. Then, he hummed a few times in a low voice, shook his head, and went silent. Lu Chen frowned and asked tentatively, "Are you saying that you don't know now? Or could it be that you couldn't find it after coming in?" Atsu nodded. Lu Chen gave a wry smile, helplessly shook his head and said, "You have so many problems. If you do it a few more times, someone will die." Then he stood up, looked left and right, said, "Forget it, if we can't find it then we'll search slowly. Anyway, we are not in a hurry, let's follow those two and see the situation first." After speaking, he walked out. But after 2 steps, Lu Chen suddenly paused. His face seemed to be deep in thought. After a moment, he quietly muttered to himself, those two refuse to use their skills and spiritual powers to walk fast. Could it be that although this place is harmless to my black fire power, but to normal cultivators, it is an obstacle? Once he thought of this, his spirit was immediately lifted. Although this thought seemed absurd, but it seemed to be able to perfectly explain the two evil cult demons' strange behavior. But Lu Chen had always been cautious, so after thinking about it, he still carefully followed behind the two and slowly pursued. He had cultivation experience, and the strange environment here could even increase his strength greatly. His speed of catching up was naturally extremely fast. If Lu Chen was not afraid of alerting the two evil cult demons, he would have caught up in the blink of an eye. However, he still maintained a distance of more than 100 feet from the two people after he finally caught up, and then slowly followed them. After walking for about half an hour, they finally passed through the underground city and arrived at the other side of the mountain wall. This made the two evil cult demons, including Lu Chen who was hiding at the back, heave a sigh of relief. There was also a stone staircase on the mountain wall here, leading to a cave in the middle. Separated by such a distance, Lu Chen relied on his sharp hearing and heard Chef say, "Hall Master, after going through that tunnel, we will almost reach the other district. The person who will receive us is there. If there are no other accidents, you should be able to see Elder Ghost very soon." The other person nodded and said, "That's good, let's go quickly. That blood moon here is eerie and strange, I always feel uncomfortable in my heart." That chef smiled and led the way up the stone stairs. Lu Chen was worried that if he followed too closely, he would be easily discovered by the two evil cult demons. After all, there was no place for him to hide at the top and bottom of the stone stairs, and he did not intend to expose himself so quickly, so he could only hide at his original position and did not dare to move rashly. Just like that, he watched as the two people walked up the stone stairs and then entered that cave. Lu Chen jumped out from his hiding place and ran towards that stone stairs. Atsu followed behind him. In a few steps they reached the side of the stone stairs and then dashed up. Lu Chen was somewhat worried that he would lose track of those two people. He secretly exerted strength in his legs, and a black flame flashed in his eyes. Suddenly, he took a step forward, and his body suddenly soared into the air. With a "hoo" sound, he actually crossed more than 20 stone steps. He was as light as a swallow, and it was astonishing. Lu Chen was also a little surprised and inexplicably helpless at his own performance. After a bitter laugh, he ran up in quick steps, and in a blink of an eye, he had already reached the entrance of the cave. When he reached the boundary, he first crouched down and hid at the entrance of the cave, then poked his head out and carefully looked inside. There was indeed a passageway inside, but it looked a little dim, and there seemed to be some twists and turns, so they couldn't see the road ahead clearly. At the same time, the figures of the two devil cult demons had already disappeared. Lu Chen frowned, his body probed inside and then walked in. At the same time, Atsu was running over from the stone stairs, about a dozen more steps to reach the entrance of the cave. He walked 2 steps in and suddenly felt his body sank. Feeling something strange, he turned around and saw that the blood-red light outside was blocked by the cave wall and could not shine on his body. It was a little dark, but there was still some light ahead. Lu Chen hesitated for a moment and still continued to walk forward. But after he walked 2 steps forward, suddenly, at the side of this cave tunnel, a fork abruptly appeared. A black figure suddenly flashed out from the shadow of the fork, a wave of bright blade light, as fast as lightning, with a biting cold murderous aura, chopped down towards Lu Chen's head. Lu Chen was taken aback, his body shook and was about to retreat, but at this critical moment, he suddenly found that the sea of energy in his body was in disorder. The black fire that he relied on the most, unexpectedly at this time, could not be activated. The blade light was dazzling. In an instant it was already in front of him. Lu Chen could even see that face behind the blade light. It was the chef from the tavern. That face that looked harmless to humans and animals, right now seemed to be filled with a fierce murderous intent. You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.